Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the stream. It is a very, very interesting time of the year. We are coming to you the day after Christmas. We are coming to you just a handful of days before the new year. And we are also coming to you the day of the Seattle Seahawks 16th game of the season. I am Brendan. That is Brandon. How you doing today, Brandon?
Doing great, man. I had an awesome Christmas. I hope you did as well on your end of it, but got some chance to hang with the family. It always puts things in perspective, of course, as to what really, does truly matter. No cliches or whatnot, but did you have a good Christmas, Brendan?
I would say so. Yeah. I'm feeling pretty good right now.
Nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Doing good.
Yeah, feeling a little less good about the state of my football team. Although I do want to say that was a good, honest game of football last week that we played against the Vikings, and it came down to a handful of boneheaded mistakes. But the team fought very hard, and in many ways, they played very well against one of the best teams in football. And I can live with that. As a fan, it's much easier to live with that than live with whatever I tried to live with after that Packers game.
Yes, it wasn't as has been, I think, about 4 times over there since certain games this year, kind of embarrassing, where it's not even it's sort of non-competitive all the way around as far as you felt about the team. And this was not that type of game necessarily.
Right. So I guess we should spend a little bit of time relitigating that Vikings game because we have not had any kind of a discussion since the game ended. Obviously, we both do our own work on our own sides of YouTube here, talking about what we feel about that game. But what did you feel like you learned from that Minnesota effort?
Well, I think that really just kind of confirms a little bit, while it wasn't an embarrassing loss to this game as far as big picture look goes, and what you look at what you've done this season against quality opponents, truly quality opponents, and you've not been able to stand toe to toe with them. And it is the biggest question that comes as we leave this season for me, regardless how the season kind of finishes up, is to think about how we get to being a contending team when we're not able to quite, if we're going to get there by next year, when we can't quite stand toe to toe in that way against this team. But the Vikings didn't do anything, I think, elaborate, Brendan. They ran a very, I think, somewhat similar game plan to what the Packers did. They maybe didn't quite execute as good early on there in the run game as the Packers did, as we were able to get a little more footing there. But they basically offensively took it that direction with it. And then defensively, Flores was as creative as we expected. That gave us issues. We didn't stay with the run game has been kind of a commonality, I felt like, in this game has been throughout the year. And a lot of the same stuff sort of played out this year that's played out. I thought there was, even though it was an embarrassing loss, Brendan, I thought the microcosm of both good and bad showed up in this game.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad to take away from this one. Personally, when I look back at this game, the one thing that I don't have mixed feelings on would be Ryan Grubb. And it's an interesting one because the offense didn't necessarily play poorly in that game. They put up 24 points on a defense that is one of the best in football. They gave up an average of like 18 a game. So it's not like the offense didn't produce. The offense moved the ball. The offense was able to put points up on the board. But the way in which that game was called as a process by Ryan Grubb continues even today to really confound me and make me wonder how this team could possibly have a bright future with him calling plays. So that to me is the number one thing that I took away from that game. I don't understand what he's doing, but I kind of don't. I'm pretty confident at this point that I do not want him here going forward.
Yeah, I feel for the guy in the respect of, his offense wants to do certain things that he can't fully do by the nature of how you're holding up in pass protection. And you've held up in recent weeks a little bit better. And this is where it gets harder to explain to Grubb on. You've had games where you've ran and you found run plays that worked, whereas early on in the year, you could say there's too much early penetration. There's too much lack of push at the front to expect that you could lean on the running game, where you could maybe give him a little bit of an olive branch to say, okay, look, I understand that you're dealing with this because when you do try to run, it's -2 yards. You're not even getting the 3 yards in a cloud of dust. But over the past few weeks, you've had run the ball fairly well when you've decided to run it, and the gap stuff included on that. And I don't know if we ran any gap in this game at all, or if we did, it was a smattering of a play or two. And he ultimately seems like an offensive coordinator who falls into that weird cliche that these spread conceptual guys can fall into at times, being that when they're at their worst, they don't want to run the ball. They just want to throw. And that's kind of that's kind of what you get in sort of that, on their worst side of it, in these spread concept kind of guys and what they can bring to the table at times on their bad side. And unfortunately, it really showed up again in this game where you've really got no excuses to bail away from the running game like he did in this one. But I just didn't feel like we gave much of a try. There was certainly a little bit of attempt to try to use Walker in the passing game, 7 catches in this game. And there's a lot of just quick throws that were, like manufactured runs out of the backfield to him, which I did like on that side of it, but I still would have liked to have seen a lot more balance, and just don't understand why he's so against it, having 2 really talented running backs. And as well, Brennan, having an offensive line that's currently constructed to be better as a run blocking unit probably right now than a pass protecting unit.
Right. And in a game where your quarterback is not healthy, when your quarterback has a bad knee, it's one thing when he's healthy. It's one thing when he's completely 100%. And maybe I kind of understand that the talent on this team is more predisposed to throwing the ball. But in a game like that, even if the running game wasn't working that well, you would still probably want to balance things out just to keep your quarterback safe. But that doesn't seem to occur to him.
Yeah, I think that's the nature of what's going on here with Grubb, is that there's a counterintuitive nature to his offense where he just, as we've spoken about many times over the weeks on this, he seems to want to call the game by how he ideally saw it in June or July. This is how I want to run my offense. This is the way I want it to go, rather than what the team he actually has out on the field and what it is doing. And what, you've got to be aware of what's currently ongoing with your team, from both injuries to the talent you have on the field, and work off of that to then marry that to what you want to do from your philosophy. I don't see a lot of marrying. I just see him trying to just kind of push his philosophy a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's not just the refusal to run the ball. I'm not impressed with these pass concepts, really. I'm not particularly impressed with the way in which he's calling passing plays. Like, how many throws in this game that we completed were completed because of a perfect throw or an incredible catch? Geno fitting the ball into a shoebox, or Metcalf surviving a safety trying to take his head off while he brings the ball in. These are not Sean McVay plays where the receiver gets wide open because he schemed something up that was brilliant. So even that part of it is not, it's not really that good. And I don't know what we're getting out of this guy, except maybe an understanding of how to use JSN. And I think there are a lot of offensive minds out there who would understand how to use JSN.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have a lot of explanation or reason for, I've been a supporter of him throughout this year, but it's gotten kind of worse as it's gone along. He's not finding more firmer footing. When he gets stuff that works, he doesn't stay with it. The 7-step drops and wanting to kind of lean on that way too often at times, and having Geno hold the ball rather than just finding those quick options. It kind of is what it is at this point, where it's been underwhelming from his standpoint. He's got flashes and things he shows, like the counter runs, like the tunnel screens, some of the concepts that could come out from time to time, but they're not out there enough. It's just sort of a smattering here and there. And then all in between, you get a lot of head scratching kind of designs on plays that just don't make sense, and down and distance stuff that doesn't make sense. Like last week, that 3rd and 9, where he's got Geno throwing in the end zone into the teeth of the defense. It just doesn't make any sense. And that's what comes down to this offense right now. It doesn't make a lot of sense in how it's set up. The DK stuff has gone completely out the door, with JSN's emergence. So you can have one receiver going at one time, but not the other, basically, I guess, in this offense, which doesn't make sense to me either. It just doesn't make sense is kind of the word we come down to on this offense with Grubb. There's way more talent than there's been, and that he's gotten out of it. And you make a good point in regards to the Geno dimes. Let's take away, because Geno's thrown as many of those high leverage throws in this year as any quarterback maybe in the sport. Now he's got the bad stuff too. I'm not saying rides on high, but you take away half those incredible dimes where Geno and a couple of quarterbacks in the sport can make those throws, and this offense looks even worse if you have a guy that can't navigate all the pressure around it. And so it's like, as bad as we all look on him right now, he's kind of gotten the benefit of a couple of things to make it even look a little bit better than really maybe where the situation truly is.
Yeah, I think that this offense would be in the bottom 8 if they had even like CJ Stroud. And CJ Stroud's not a bad quarterback. But I think that the difference between Geno and CJ would be like, we have 5 wins right now instead of 8. Or we average 20 points a game instead of 23 or whatever it is.
Yeah, I could see that kind of difference as well. I like CJ a lot, but he's not going to be able to handle the pressure that Geno's been under. He's not dealt with it too well overall in the Texans this year, where a lot of people are like, oh, underwhelming second year. No, CJ is still very good. It's just he needs his pass protection to a decent degree to be held up for him to be his most effective. And Geno's shown he can play even without pass protection being at its best, but Grubb hasn't helped him on that pass protection stuff either.
Right. So I'm kind of at the point personally where, last week I said I kind of want him gone, but I wasn't going to bang the drum for it. I think at this point I need to start banging the drum a little bit when we get to this offseason, because this team should be about at the point where they're trying to really go for it, because they've got a lot of really good young players approaching or hitting their prime. And I don't want it to be held back by an OC who, forget about being a bad play caller. He doesn't even seem to have common sense sometimes. And I don't want that to be the thing that holds us back next year when we already have a full year of evidence that he can't get it done.
Yeah, I'm maybe not going to be as hard lined on the banging the drum. I'm disappointed by it. Some of it depends on who's the guy you're looking to bring in here. Some of it depends upon who's the guy you're looking to bring in here, who you now got to change over your scheme for to get that guy in, change your personnel over and hit the reset button on that. I'm not against it, but I just kind of want to know who specifically it is that we're finding is the replacement there. And that's not to say I'm pro Grubb at this point or that I have a high level of confidence. Some of it just comes from my Brendan, as I've adjusted through the back end of this year. I come more and more to a standpoint of feeling like the team is generally not going to be ready to be a contender by 2025. And that is kind of informing some of this, where there's a lack of maybe going to be, for me, as you see from my outlook of things, just a sense of, we got to get this going. Come on. Tapped. It's going to be more of like, I sit in the pocket and just watch this kind of thing unfold a little bit.
Yeah, but you can still be a good team. You can still find a way to, instead of winning 9 or 10 games, win 11 or 12, and at least have a season where you've got something to hang your hat on.
I don't see a team at this point that's going to win that next season. No.
Really? You don't think they can even take a step forward?
I don't. I'm open to it. I'm not going to be militant in this direction of things, but Brendan, the past couple of years, I've had my outlook on this team, and I've put him a couple of wins higher into that place like you're talking about, and given him a bit of the benefit of the doubt on their roster construction and their philosophy behind roster construction. And I look at this team right now and I say, as I said last week to you, there's two different ideologies of player. Is this year successful? Yes. Are you ready to be a contender next year? Two different things. Both of those things can be separate in their answers. So this year can be successful. McDonald can be successful with that. And you're still not quite ready to be a contender next year. And I think that this team is not finishing up stronger on both sides of the ball as this year is winding down, Brendan. Instead, in a lot of ways, we've got parts kind of sliding off and not being at their worst, but not being at their strongest. And for whatever you have on this team, Brendan, that's good, that you can point to as a benefit to this team, there's always some detraction to them on the other side of it. Almost every single part. And I went through it and I really thought a lot about this player by player, position by position. And I just go with having limited money, yes, you can clear cap space, but I don't know that I want to clear a whole bunch of cap space to eat dead money or push voidable years into 26 and 27 when I just don't have that confidence or faith right now necessarily in the team in that way.
Yeah. I think there's a little something there. I think that there is a place between contender and where we are right now that we could reach, but obviously, right now, the confidence in Schneider is low.
How can you have that confidence necessarily, though, when you look at not only this year, but the past couple of years, you've beaten up on some of the bottom level teams, the bottom feeders. Sweet. When we talk about being a contender, that's a team that's got to stand toe to toe with some of the best. Anytime that you faced any team this year or last year that's in that realm, you, for the most part, just get smacked in the mouth. You're 3-6 at home right now. You've lost your home field advantage, playoff advantage. Like, I'm okay with saying I think this team will take that step forward, but how? You're going to probably have to rebuild 3/5 of the interior of your offensive line. You're going to have to find a number 2 wide receiver on the outside. You got to make decisions on Geno and DK. You've got a edge group that they're okay, but Hall and Mafe are not difference makers. Mafe is going to come out this year basically putting up the same year as last year. And while Hall's come forward as a pass rusher, he's going to be like 7 or 8 sacks on the year. He's still a bad run defender. Every place you go, Tariq Woolen, what are you doing there? Another number 2 cornerback position. What do you do there? Got to still sign Ernest Jones to a contract extension. You've got Byron Murphy, who's a really good player. He's going to have a solid rookie year, Brendan, but he's playing nose tackle. Leonard Williams is playing great 3-tech, so there's no room to move him over to 3-tech. But guess what? That's not changing next year either. So where does Byron go next year when Leonard Williams is still here? Does he still operate from the nose tackle then and play out of position? Everything's got this sort of, here's a plus, but then there's this negative to it. And it's hard when you mount that up across the board from my perspective on this to come out of that and say that wash, that naturally is a team that gets better 2 to 3 games. I mean, walk it from me. I want to understand your standpoint on it. When you do get smacked in the mouth this often this year by these contending type teams, and how do you get the confidence then into this offseason with a guy like John Schneider and some of the moves he's made in these offseasons, especially his spending money and his approach to like building this offensive line? How do you have that confidence to make that kind of prediction and say, well, yeah, this is a team that should just with a couple of this and that and this and that get themselves to a contending state?
Well, I don't know if there's confidence in it right now because, like you said, Schneider has. I mean, there's a lot we don't know about Schneider right now, to be perfectly honest, because the Carroll left less than a year ago. But I mean, you're right about everything that you say. I think I agree with all the things that you're getting to there. But what I would say is that we see teams do it. We have seen teams do it. We know it's possible. You just have to make the right decision over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And if you don't want to be confident in that, I get that. Right. I mean, last year, just to take a microcosm of it, last year's free agency spending was atrocious. Like, most of those guys are not even on the team anymore. The guys that we signed who were supposed to help us through this first Mike McDonald year, most of them I don't even think are on the team anymore. So it's hard to have confidence after that. I totally agree with that. But
has that not been part and parcel of what John Schneider has done in free agency over about the last 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, there's we wonder how much of that is him and how much of it was Carroll, of course.
But it's harder to put it on Carroll when he continues to do it after Carroll is gone, right? That's the point there is like, okay, Carroll leaves. Now, if you have a different philosophy, that philosophy should be changed into this offseason and how you apply it. But it wasn't. It's a very specific path he goes down in free agency every year or has over the last 5 years. And it's specifically exactly the way he did last offseason. There was nothing that differentiated or separated itself off. And that not going to be in tier wave 1 of free agency. It's going to spend a lot of one year deals on guys, eat up a lot of my cap space because of those proliferation of 1-year deals. I'm going to sign a last leg free agent to couple last leg free agents to the offensive line, probably on 1-year deals, 2-year deals at the most. There's no commitment there. I have a hard time then going, well, that was then Carroll then pushing on the prior. I go, well, don't you then go, that's kind of Schneider's way. Predictively speaking, I think you got to anticipate that's John Schneider's way until he shows you differently.
Yeah. I think that's actually a pretty fair way of looking at it at this point. You're right. And, it's not a philosophy that I hate, but you have to draft very well to make up for it. So, and we'll see if we do or not. I mean, right now, this 2024 class, it's mixed, right? I mean, Christian Haynes may have been a massive strikeout. I don't know what to think anymore. Lomi is so bad, and Haynes apparently can't start over him. That makes you wonder. It just has to.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. It's completely on that. I just, and they're looking at maybe moving him to center now is what we're hearing on that. And I'm on, who knows on which way they go with that one with it, but it's not settled and it's not close to settled really.
Yeah, but what I'm just saying is that a team making a leap from a 9 or 10 win season to an 11 or 12 win season is pretty common in this league. And we as fans should have that expectation. And if we don't meet that expectation, then we might say, well, it's time to find a different GM who can actually get us to that next level.
I might not be there. Yeah, I might not be there on that. And my thinking on this just goes that it's what I want to do is build this right and properly. And I think that we've been pushed a little bit by the sense of urgency to contend for the now. And it's more of what I'd like to see the team do is take a step back on this one and stop pushing everything. We put voidable years on DK Metcalf's deal to restructure him this past offseason, right? Voidable years into 2026, 27. Like I'd rather sit back and chill and relax and assess this thing and do it properly. I know that everybody is in a hurry. I know that everybody's sitting there going, we haven't been to the playoffs. I think that rush and that we haven't been to the playoffs since 2000. We got to get that starts to now inform your personnel decision. And that process of patience starts to get thrown out the door in the name of speeding this thing up and microwaving it. And I think that that's what could lead to this thing getting thrown off the tracks from us getting to the place of contention. That's my main worry here. So I'm more going to be in the road into this offseason from my perspective on this, Brendan, of saying I'm not pushed in that way with John. I'm not really feeling rushed on this. You move John, Brendan, as I've said, now you've got a new GM. Now you got a new GM who's going to want a new coach. Now we're right back to hitting the full reset button again a year down the line from now if McDonald isn't found some success at that point. And I don't want to do that. That's a much longer term reroute at that point. Really want to avoid that if I can all the way down the line. And so I'm just going to be kind of more in that patient pocket point for next year. As good as this year's success was, I'm not putting it with an expectation level that it's go big or go bust with John next year if we don't get into the playoffs or don't get in the playoffs.
Okay, I can get behind that. I would also ask, is the team going to take that approach? Is John Schneider going to be willing to take a step back? I don't know. A lot of the times we see that GMs aren't willing to do that because they feel like they're going to get fired if they do that.
Well, and I get that could be where, but that also then you're right about that. Number one, you're completely right. But then I think, Brendan, you could say that's also, if you let that be your guiding light, something that will guide you into the wrong direction, potentially even hell.
It could, but I guess we're all on the same. We're all on the same ride here, and if it goes to hell, then we end up in hell.
It's possible, yeah, it's true.
Right. Okay. So that was the offense. The main thing I would just wanted to talk about was Grubb because he's the one guy that I'm really just kind of done with. And I was looking at some data yesterday, it was a couple days ago. Looking at teams that use personnel similar to the Seahawks, where they basically live in 11 personnel and then they do a little bit of 12 and then everything else is basically nothing. It's fairly common. It's pretty common to line up like that. So I think you could at least find another offensive mind that is used to working with that setup. Now, we are going to have to find, obviously, a new outside receiver next year. We are probably going to have to find at least one new tight end. I understand that because I think both of the two tight ends we went into this season as our 1 and 2 are going to be gone. But I don't think it's something that you look at and you go, well, this can't be done. Like, maybe it takes Mike McDaniel off the board, right? Because Mike McDaniel is a guy who doesn't go 3 receivers hardly at all, actually. One of the lowest rates. But there are a lot of teams that run the offense the same way that we've been trying to run it this year and a good chunk of last year.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat fairly common. And I mean, like the air raid principle as an offense is something that's unique to Grubb, but there are air raid principles on every single team and every single playbook in the NFL. So there's some overflow. You're going to get to that, but it's also about what type of receivers do you need, Brendan? Do you need yak guys? Do you need contested catch guys? Do you need guys that are route runners that are going to get open purely within your scheme like you might need in a West Coast offense? For instance, right now we have a team that's one of the league least teams out there as far as contested catches go. They're not a really great yak team outside of when Jackson Smith gives sort of tunnel screens and a little bit in open air. He's gotten a little bit better this year on it, but DK doesn't give you a lot as far as the yak goes. Offensive lineman. Do you need a coach in here who wants the bigger offensive lineman, all a little bit like Buffalo with their big old guys that are going to just blast guys off line scrimmage, or the Rams? Or do you need the mobile guys that can move in space? This is what I mean by if you go to a different coordinator who's got something a little bit different outlook from the personnel you have in house, it's not that you have to change everybody over. Cross is going to work for every coordinator. Lucas probably works for every coordinator, but the interior 3 parts, some of the receivers on your roster outside of Jackson Smith, there might be some questions there on a new coordinator if that works or not.
No, I got question marks about those guys regardless, even if we kept Grubb, like especially the interior offensive line guys. I don't know if anybody would like those guys right now.
No, it's fair. And I'm not going to be anti if they want to move off Grubb. I'm just not, I'm not driven as much by it one way or the other at this point. Look, it's disappointing me at the end of it. I'm not a pro guy on it. Again, some of this is just going to be, I think I get a sense from some people that their decision-making has a sense of, not you on this, but just what I get from people I speak to on this a little bit, where there's a sense of urgency on this thing in order to draw it and press it to 25 and be ready to go from 25 with that magical new OC that'll clean up the stuff across the board. And my feeling on this just feels like, I don't know if there's problems with the OC and there's problems here with how the talent's kind of put together on the team. I think it's a both, not an either or.
All right. So defense, I didn't feel much from the defense in that game. They played average. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't good. It was just like, It was like, there was some good stuff, some bad stuff. It's just like you shrug your shoulders. Other than maybe Leonard Williams, I can't even identify one player that I thought played great. It was just like
I think Jaron Reed played great.
Okay, Jaron Reed, that's a good one. And I'm hesitant to give him any credit at all because he'll probably take it the wrong way, but Woolen did actually play pretty well overall, I think.
I was not in that place with Woolen on the
Really?
overall. Yeah. We don't know on the touchdown over the top what he gave up, whether or not he's supposed to or not. Would like to get him a little bit better press off of Justin Jefferson, but he's a good receiver. Maybe Love blew the coverage over the top and he's supposed to be the guy, but it was a weird look on Woolen. He's out the first series of the game because he breaks team rules. Just another one of the guys, like all these people I talk about on this team right now. It's just like, yeah, there's the talent's there and undeniable on that side of it. But, I think you could make the argument with Woolen at this point. He had his best year in his rookie year. That's not the best thing here for a guy going his third year here. Yeah. And did he have a purely bad game? No. Last week was worse with the Packers, but did I see him respond from that Packers performance, which was probably the worst one of his here in his career, Seattle, and really bounce back in a way? Well, no. And especially watching him miss that first series where you give up a touchdown on that drive. Well, you had your worst game of your career off the Packers, and then you did something during the week to cause yourself to miss the first series of the game.
No, that part I agree with for sure.
Woolen's been very frustrating to me this year.
Yeah.
I'm very frustrated watching him as a player. So maybe I'm stuff's just colored on this, and maybe it's a little bit just on the general nature of this just being colored on. There's a lot of frustrating parts to this team right now. It's hard for me to kind of quite look at where we're at with just the pure good on it when so much of the frustrating side seems to be growing a little bit more and more at times.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm very confident that the touchdown was on Love. I mean, it's cover 2. Maybe Woolen should have dropped back sooner. I mean, he's watching the flat. There's nobody in the flat. Maybe he should have dropped back better than he did. But I think the touchdown itself is still on Julian Love.
My things with that is that I'm fine. Then you got to lay your press. If you're going to trail and you're going to sit 4 yards back off the trail off press because you're sitting on some under route, then the press has got to be hammered harder off the line of scrimmage. He gave him damn near close to a free release off that line of scrimmage with a little lateral sidestep to his right. And that's where you're long and 6'3". You're not 5'11", Brendan. 5'11", 32, 31-inch long arm guys are going to have that hard time getting their arms on that guy and getting him redirected. But if that's the commitment level, then the commitment's got to be at the press of the line then, in my opinion. Because he gave a weak-ass press, and then he sort of just, slow rolled his drop on his back. They're supposed to be in cover 2. You're in trail technique. I guess he was in trail, but that's about 3.5 yards of trail that he's allowing between him and the player. So, I mean, technically, maybe he's in position technically, but could he have done more on that play, especially on a year where at times I'm wondering, could you have done more effort-wise on this play? Could you have done more effort-wise on that play? Yeah. And it wasn't, again, his worst year, but I didn't see a guy bouncing back off the performance last week playing inspired brand of ball either.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But I think if you look at some of the numbers, it's like, I don't know if you can blame him for this game. I still don't really have any faith in him going forward long term, but I do think that he certainly played better than the previous week. That might have been the worst game of his career against the Packers. So, but other than that, it was just like, it's okay. The pass rush was okay. We didn't force a turnover, allowed 27 points. It's like, I don't know. It was just kind of and it's actually been kind of rare this year. It feels like every week the defense either plays really great or really bad. That was actually maybe one of the first times this year where they were just okay, where they were just like average. So I don't know what to say about it. Obviously, I think the thing that stands out is having Trey Brown try to cover Justin Jefferson one-on-one on third down in the red zone. That bothers me very much. I don't know what happened there. But other than that, I don't have a lot to say about the defense overall. It's just kind of like,
Yeah, it was kind of just a Mayday. The two interior guys, Leonard and Jaron, I thought held down well. Hard to know much of anybody else out there on the day that stood out. Devin Witherspoon was pretty solid. Josh Jobe had a little bit of a bounce back game from where he's been recently to a degree. But yeah, there's not a lot of really noteworthy.
I still like what Tyrese Knight's doing. He's still playing ahead of where I thought he would be. Maybe give him a little bit of credit. But I mean, it's hard to stop Kevin O'Connell. He's really, really, really good.
Yeah, he's solid.
All right, so I think that's about it in terms of the Vikings game. I can't really think of too much else to say about that one. I mean, the Vikings are really, really good. They're hard to beat, and we did play with them. I mean, we had a lead with 4 minutes left, and then just found enough mistakes to not finish the job. And It hurts because you're right there, man. You're right there. You're in field goal range. You've got the ball with 3 minutes left. You've got the Vikings at their own 25-yard line, down 4. You've got all these things happening, and you need one more person to make a play, and it doesn't happen.
That's it, man. Yeah, it did come down close. You had a chance there at the end. So it's just couldn't hold on to it. Defense couldn't get that one stand after you got the lead with it, and this is what it is. Came up just short.
Yeah, and maybe it's as simple as, with everything else that happened in that game, if Byron Murphy doesn't lightly grab Sam Darnold's face mask, apparently you need to try to rip his head off because then you get away with it, right? If you try to rip it off right in front of the referee, they won't call it. But if you grab it with 2 of your fingers on its way down and you tug it a little bit, then they notice it.
True. Yeah.
That might have been the difference because that was 3rd and 19 about to come up.
Yeah, you had him potentially set there. A tough moment there, especially for Byron, who's had a hard time getting back there a lot of times because he's at the nose tackle position. But yeah, what you gonna do? That's NFL.
All right, we have some donos coming in here. Let's see here. Feed me more Seahawks. Thank you for the $5. This is actually an interesting one. Your least favorite Seahawks player in the last 30 years that played really good for us, and no one-year wonder like Jamal Adams doesn't count. So it would be somebody who played really well, but we personally didn't like.
An A-tier player that you didn't like.
Oh, man. I mean, I guess once Richard Sherman left the team, some of the stuff he was saying and doing kind of annoyed me, but I don't think I don't know. That's different, right? He left the team. He was on a different team. He was on a division rival. And then I started to get annoyed by him. I think that's a little different than what this question is asking.
Yeah, I mean, Sherman might be the guy closest to it just because I think that he was annoying for the opponents, but you also knew that he could be annoying within the own team and some of the stuff that he was saying at the time when he was here, and how he would go kind of at rust even a little bit at times with it. And, do you even have as a player, like a lot of his game was built upon, the ability to, grab and hold guys. And, he'd play right on that line with it. I get that. And some of that's probably how they were instructed to do it at the time from the Seahawks corners, but it was also not pure then skill versus a guy like Revis that is just sticking tight and close to the guy. You'd oftentimes with Richard see the sort of the pull and the yank and the grab built, in there within his game quite a bit. And again, he's a master at it. I'll give him credit for it in that way. But still, it does when you look at him as far as aesthetically seeing, you're watching a guy, it's official looking. So I'd go to him probably.
Yeah, that's the best I can do. Like, Corin Robinson was never an A-tier player for us, right? I mean, he was S-tier talent.
1 year wonder. He had a 1,300-yard year 1 year, but yeah, nothing else outside that really.
I remember TJ Hushmanzada was a jackass when he was here, but he never got to that point either.
Yeah, he never clipped through on the production standpoint. Team was horrible there too, but
All right. I think that's probably the best we can do. That's a tough one, though. I mean, I have appreciation for anybody that played at a high level for this team for more than 1 year. Like, it's hard not to.
Yeah, I'm a struggle to find anybody that's maybe an A. Everybody's been pretty good guys on top of the good players that we've had. It'd be hard not to, root for them or, be in favor of them on that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Feed me more. Dogzilla, thank you for the $2. Isn't there only a slim chance this game matters? Correct. There is, but I'm kind of not really thinking about that. I don't want to be the team that breaks the Bears 9-game losing streak. I don't want to lose to the Bears. Like, that's just embarrassing. And, I don't like feeling embarrassed, just on a human level.
Nor do I. And I don't know if I'd say it's slim necessarily. Certainly the chances are really good that the Rams are going to be able to beat the Cardinals, but that is a divisional matchup on Saturday. That's a little bit of a shortened week. Rams coming back from New York, maybe a Cardinal team that's suddenly a little bit motivated to play spoiler role after they got beat by the Panthers last week. So it's slim. I'm expecting the Rams to take care of business, but you got to put them in that position to force them to do that. Don't make it easy on them, and get this win against a team that is a very winnable game.
Right. I mean, this Bears team has been lifeless ever since they lost. They fired Eberflus.
Yeah,
They were
they're in
competitive. Yeah.
Cabo mode all the way here. So but you gotta, the key with that, as we've seen Brendan at times, is you got to put that team down early, get up on them early and get them shutting it down. Then, you let that team stay with you, or you give them signs of life, let them get ahead of you. They start feeling good in a year where not a lot's felt good about. That's where now the game starts to get real tough.
Mm-hmm, right. Dant to Lion, thank you for the $4.99. Go Hawks. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment.
Dandelion?
Yeah, thank you, Dandelion. And go Hawks it is. I still want to win these games. Even if we get to that last game and we know we're eliminated, I still want to win. I still want to beat I want to beat the Rams, even if they're playing backups. I don't care. I want to win games. I want to try to build a winning culture here with this new head coach. And I want to get to 10 wins. Even if it's not good enough to make the playoffs this year, I'm still not getting away from that because, we can't make the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think you gain a lot by losing 2 games versus winning the 2 games. It's much further better to win the 2 games for sure.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. John Stillwell, thank you for the member message.
Hey, John.
26 months. Hey, guys, how's it going? Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey, John, it's good to see you, brother. Hope you're doing well. Merry Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say things are going overall for me anyway pretty well. I wish things were going a little bit better for the football team, but so it is.
So it is. It happens this way sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. I appreciate that's 26 months on your side, so he's been there quite some time.
John's working his way up almost 3 years in here. Let's go, John.
Mm-hmm. All right. Feed me more. Again, thank you for the $2. Brendan Nelson, you better not be on the Fire John train. Well, I'm not on the Fire John train, but there are some things here that are a little bit frustrating for me. I could definitely be on that train next year. I think that if we're here next year and I see the same things happening, I probably would be on that train, but I'm not on the train right now. No.
And I'm and look at Brendan, though I have an outlook on this one, I've been kind of thinking on the past, week or two on where I'm going to be on this side of this with John and the situation there. I'm not also going to push back against you if that's the place that you want to be. It's just my specific outlook on this, and I'm not ardently so on it. I understand somebody being in the place of it, of saying, you've not won a playoff game, but one since 2017. Any other general manager in this kind of situation with this amount of time would have been let go at this point. He's getting a little bit of an extra benefit of the doubt because of the Super Bowls from 10 years ago. So I can get that thinking a little bit with this, especially if it sort of the behavior sort of continues in certain areas, like ignoring the offensive line and going dollar store on it every single off season. But just where I happen to land on it, where I'm kind of fitting to.
Yeah, I'm not against it. If we get to the off season, Black Monday, and we fire John Schneider, I'm going to be like, oh wow, okay. Let's see what happens. I'm not going to be upset. I'm not going to be angry or anything like that. I'm just going to be like, okay, let's see what happens next. I'm open to it, but I'm not on the train. It's there's a difference there.
Yeah, understandable.
I still think he's done some pretty decent work in the draft lately. There is something to be said for that. I think that his free agency work has been mostly a disaster, but at the same time, things can get better. Things can change. He can improve his process.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
John Stillwell, thank you for the $50.
Let's go,
wow.
John.
All right, John.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas indeed. Do you think we are going to continue being a zone running team? Well, you can do both, and most teams, I think, do both. You don't see teams do 100% of either. But bottom line is, right now, this team found something that worked with the gap, and I don't know why you would stop doing it until it stops working. And this last game, I feel like they did. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, I think, John, the team's going to be committed as long as Grubb's here to running both styles of scheme. As Brendan spoke about the gap and the counter gap stuff that you've been running last few weeks that's found great success. I think you've got to lean into that into the future because you've got the mobile linemen to make it work. I mean, that's as much the key of why it works as Saatoa and Abraham and Charles Cross are all guys that are comfortable moving 15 to 20 yards in space to go get to their block. They don't have a problem with that. The zone problem and scheme has been with that, I think, John, is two different things. One, you just haven't had the guys purely talented enough to push guys off the line of scrimmage. But then I think that's where the cohesion comes in on this, John, too, where to get the zone scheme to work, you've got to hit those duo blocks at the point of where you're running the play and then have it peeled down with perfect timing. You've got to have those linemen who are synced up and how to lay their double team block right so that the first lineman can set the first lineman can help his buddy out to get the guy in position so that he can climb at the right time to get to the linebacker. It's a timing thing. It's a chemistry thing. It's a thing that you don't get, but with cohesion and time of these guys working together. And the thing that we've seen over the past few years here, John, is it's an ever revolving door of offensive linemen going through there. And I think that you can start to run this zone scheme so much better once you get that cohesion in place and those starting five locked in and you know who those guys are going to be. Now the zone can start to work a lot better than it has, because you see a lot of it now where we can block the zone up about 90% great, but that 10% is what allows the penetration or the one guy to get blown up into the backfield so that Walker's getting hit right after the handoff to allow the play to get completely blown apart. And that's where that, again, the chemistry, cohesion, getting the plays down to the nth degree is what you got to have to make those zone scheme work. First, the gap where you're just kind of more man-on-manning it, and then pulling two guys back across the formation and getting a numbers game to one side of the field. So it's allowing you not to have to be as drive blocking in your role. So some of this is going to come by improvement of a talent if they can add interior help in there, John, with the interior line that can't get the push. But a big part of it to me is that cohesion, chemistry, getting those guys all working as one almost telepathically as you see those really true great offensive lines throughout the league. I mean, the Eagles, they've had Matilla and Johnson and Juergens taken over for Kelsey, but he was ready to take over for Kelsey's the guard, and Dickerson there at left guard. I mean, they just don't have the same kind of thing that we have of all these moving parts. And zone is a scheme that's based to blocking to a spot and based to getting double teams. It's not a scheme that's based to just you beat your man mano-a-mano. And so you need that same kind of guys as a cluster working together to make it roll, in my opinion, John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you asked me which one I prefer, I like zone more than gap, but that's not to say that I'd rather run zone concepts with a gap-based team or a gap-based scheme with a zone players. Like, you run what your players allow you to do as much as possible. That's just common sense. You do whatever you can do with the players you have. And that seems to me to be what Ryan Grubb is really struggling with right now, understanding that I have the team that I have and I have to work with the team that I have. That to me is, I think if you were to overall describe what his issue is, it would be that.
Yeah, I think he wants to live more in zone than the gap stuff. To Brennan's point on this, John, it's that he's gone to the gap because it's kind of like begrudgingly. And I think this is also why you didn't see as much gap last week. I think where he wants to be is, depending on the opponent and what the opponent runs defensively will depend upon what kind of running style we run opponent by opponent. I mean, that's inherently, John, what's at the heart of what's supposed to be Grubb's offensive scheme, is that it's not a fix to one thing. It's not a spread concept thing that's going to just dink and dunk you to death. It's a spread concept team that's going to have the deep shots built in, and it's going to have misdirection, and it's going to have a lot of pre-snap motion. And so it's not meant to be just a zone run scheme, but also to be able to have the gap scheme so that if you have an opponent that is super weak against that gap and that you can hit them in that way, or they're going to blitz from this side and you hit the gap to the other side of the field and you're catching the blitzers to the high side and you got a bunch of freedom over here and open holes to this other side, because that's the way that defense wants to run it. Now, week by week, you can change your game plan to accommodate to where that defense is weak. I think right now we can't exactly do that because he's just trying to do the, any port in a storm, John, to find just what is going to work. Is there anything I can find running game that work? Hell, I'll run the read option with Geno if we can make this thing work at this point. And I think that he's kind of got to that point. That's why we went to the gap. I think it's not just because he was like, oh, here's what we can use. I think he's like, let's try this.
Yeah, I think that his first year at UW, they were primarily gap, and then the second year they were primarily zone. So he's done both. He's had success with both. So I think I want to sit here and say I think that his preference is to just do whatever works, but clearly not based on this last game.
No, it's the thing I didn't get about is because you have the Vikings like the Cardinals, Brendan, that are blitz heavy. And so you can anticipate you're going to get some stack boxes. Absolutely. And then if you can move your line in a certain way, I mean, you get double A gap pressure, right? Two linebackers in the A gap. Okay. So now let's say you're pulling LeMay and Lucas back across the scheme, and those two inside linebackers get pinned inside because of their pre-snap alignment. They get stuck inside because they're not off ball at that point. Now you come back around and you pull it through. Or you get a blitzer, like I said, coming from the high side of the formation, you go down to the low side or the weak side, from strong side to weak. And you didn't see him running that, whereas that's a big part of what you did to the Cardinals. And that run that's Charbonnet against the Cardinals in Arizona for 60 yards, Brendan, that's with Baker coming from what would be basically a free safety cover 2 concept point. I know he's more strong safety. And then he comes down to the strong side of your formation. You ran it down to the weak side and you busted it for a 60-yard run. So that's the part I don't get why he didn't roll it more this week with the Vikings, because I thought that you would have seen them more vulnerable in that same kind of way.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, thank you, John, very much.
John,
for that.
You're the man.
Yeah,
you're the man, John. I appreciate you for that, brother.
PGZ206, thank you for the $5. What do you guys think about picking up Justin Fields next year?
Well, I'll let you start. You start with this one. I'll pick it up off you.
Yeah, I'm not a Justin Fields fan. I think he's bad. And on this team, I think he gets sacked about 13 times a game. He's really, really bad at playing with an offensive line. It's the Russell Wilson thing, except maybe even worse with him. It might actually be worse with him in terms of being able to play with an offensive line. With this line, I don't think he'd survive. I've heard a lot of reports that indicate that he's not a very hard worker. I don't think he's really a quarterback. I think he's more of like I think he's a glorified running back. And even if I liked him, I don't think that this is a healthy environment for a young quarterback to try to develop him. I think that trying to get that young quarterback to develop into being the next franchise guy would probably fail, because other than having some pretty good receivers, there's really not a lot going on this team that is conducive to developing quarterback talent right now.
Yeah, I think PGZ, Brendan probably summed it up pretty good to where I'm at. I have worries about Justin Fields' work ethic. I think that him going into Pittsburgh and not being able to beat out Russell Wilson, even when he gets the wide opening to go and take that job with Russell's injury in training camp, on a Steeler team that has pretty good pass protection, has a good offensive line, and gives Justin that time to be able to go back there and show what he can do at his best, where he could say, going in that PGZ, well, Chicago put me behind a hellacious offensive line. I got hammered all the time. Look at Caleb Williams getting sacked 60 times right now this year. You put me on behind a good offensive line. Look what I can do. Put him behind a good offensive line, and he can't unseat a 35, 36-year-old diminished Russell Wilson from the position. Not that Russell Wilson's bad, but he's not prime Russell Wilson anymore. And I take that as a little bit of an indicator there. And like Brendan said on this PGZ, you're not putting him behind a Steelers offensive line. You're going to put him behind much more of a similar offensive line to the one that he played in Chicago. And he's kind of already shown you that if you put him behind that offensive line, he's not going to hold up particularly well.
Yeah, and I think if you actually go back and look at it, the offensive line the Bears had in 2022 was much better than this one. They were actually second in pass block win rate that year, and he made them look terrible. And, again, it's the same thing as Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson got sacked 50 plus times last year for Denver. And this year, Bo Nix has gotten sacked like 12 times. And Denver has the number 1 ranked pass blocking offensive line by every metric. So it's the same thing.
I think it is kind of the same thing there, PGZ, where you trace some of that back, trace it to Justin. It's going to be holding the ball on a long period of time, processing in the pocket, getting through your reads quickly. A lot of that pressure with Chicago gets to him, as Brendan says, the pass win rate is good. It's because you're holding on that ball around 3-second mark. And we come back to, okay, the work ethic stuff. If a guy doesn't have work ethic, how do I see that play out on the football field? Or he's going to be confused pre-snap. He's going to be confused post-snap. He's not going to get through certain reads in the right way. These type of things are things that you see show up in his game, even this year with the Steelers. And that does give me a little bit concerned as a prospect with him as a player. And he was a guy coming out that you had those worries. But the thing you heard about him coming out, PGZ, the thing that was said, and man, when you hear about this as a quarterback prospect in college, where everybody's giving you the flowers, everybody from those local programs is trying to bump you up. And they said he was last in the building, first out. That was and guys have room to get better and become adults and all that other stuff. But, have we heard, that he's got this insane work ethic since he's come out? Have we heard that get turned on its ear since he's gotten to become a pro? I don't think we have. It may be there, but we just haven't seen it, proof of it, or heard much about it.
Yeah. You almost never hear that about any player in any sport. For last guy in, first guy out. That is so rare. You always hear the opposite.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. They will, even programs will lie about that stuff internally, right? They'll tell the people like those rumors won't get out because they want to make sure the program continues to look good after the players leave. So to hear it, there's probably some fire to that particular smoke on that side of it. And let's remember that the Steelers picked this kid up and had some chance with him in OTAs to take a look at him and see where he was at in his development, and decided not to pick up his 5th-year option. Another indicator.
Right. And again, even if I like Justin Fields, I would say this is not a good environment to develop him. There are a couple of young quarterbacks that I do like that you could probably go get this offseason if you want to go that route. I like the idea of trading for Will Levis, and I like the idea of trading for Hendon Hooker. Those would be my 2 targets if that's the path you went. I just don't think that we have the infrastructure in place to develop them, even if we got them.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't be on either of those 2 guys. I mean, Levis, you'd have the same issue with Justin Fields. I think, with Levis, he might be a little bit of a harder worker, but the dealing with the pressure stuff, he's worse than Fields in dealing with pressure. So I think you're going to, have an even potential worse situation there on your hands with that. But I get it. Yeah. I think outside the box, maybe with this QB situation.
I think with Levis, though, his offensive line really is that bad. Like the Titans' offensive line in every pass blocking metric that I've looked at is right there at the bottom. It's not like with Fields, where he's been behind some offensive lines that are ranked fairly well, and he still gets sacked too much.
Yeah, but we've also got the coach there at Tennessee has been openly frustrated with our guy this year a couple of different times, which speaks, I think, a little bit more to just it being able to be pinpointed just to the offensive line.
I mean, if he liked him, he'd be keeping him in Tennessee, and you wouldn't be able to trade for him. So you do have to try to find that. You have to thread the needle here. You have to find the guy that you can get who you can fix at the same time.
Yeah, but if you feel confident about, you don't want to just take flyers on guys. You want to take guys that you've got a good amount of confidence that you can tap into that upside that they have. And with Will Levis to merely say, well, he's got a bad offensive line, so then we'll be able to tap into his upside where we don't have a good offensive line. We don't have a certain offense in place. The issues with him goes back to college on some of the decision making. And yeah, he's under duress in college too, but he's still not yet proven that the decision making is up to snuff. And the 2 things that I always go to with quarterbacks, Brendan, are arm strength and processing. And with Will Levis, there's questions with him go back to college on the processing front, to where if I'm making a move for that guy, where is the confidence in that he's going to reach that upside here? How do we get to that point on making that kind of trade? And I just can't see it there with him on how that adds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it'd be cheap, though. It'd probably be like a 5th-round pick at this point, and the memes alone would be worth it. Will Levis memes are worth a 5th-round pick.
Oh, there's a lot of Hawk fans out there that like themselves Levis, no doubt on that one. Okay.
Yeah. And Hendon Hooker, I just feel bad for. He gets drafted to Detroit, and then out of nowhere, Jared Goff becomes a good quarterback again, and now he's just sitting there. Somebody I think is going to go for that guy this offseason, and it might work. I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but I think he has a chance to be good at this league, and he's just been completely robbed of his opportunity there.
Yeah, you may have to give a pretty good price to get him out of Detroit, because I'm sure Detroit, with having a little bit of an aging Jared Goff, likes the thought process of still having another year of Hooker there as a quality backup if he goes down for a Super Bowl contender. And they're not going to have a lot of money to want to go out there and spend for a high-quality backup on the open market. So it's kind of nice for them to have Hooker in-house there. I don't know that he's really going to be available via trade unless you really want to pay a high price, which I would not want to do.
True. Let's see here. Feed me more Seahawks. Thank you for the $2. Thoughts on how the NFC West will shake out next season? This is really hard.
Yeah, I would normally try to give you some kind of answer on this, Feed Me, but I would say that I don't really know which way this will go. The Niners, are they going to let go of Shanahan? Are they going to pay Purdy? Are they going to break it all down or try to run it back again? The Rams, is Stafford going to retire? Are they going to move off of Cooper Kupp? I mean, if so, then they're in a place of having to rebuild through. But both of those teams could just as much say, damn the torpedoes, let's do it. Let's go at it another year. Stafford comes back another season. Arizona Cardinals have over $100 million to spend this offseason, and they're probably going to double their win total from last year, the first one under Gannon. I would estimate that, you're going to have another very hyper-competitive division next year. There's probably not going to be a true lead dog running out in front a little bit like this year. It's probably going to be everybody kind of, punching at each other. I don't know that there's an elite team within the division either next year, though. Feed Me.
Yeah. My understanding from what I've heard is that the Niners aren't even thinking about firing Shanahan. They just extended him, so they would be on the hook for a ton of money if they did. So I
They
don't
could
think
trade
that.
him.
I still don't see it, man. What would you have to get back? You'd have to get like multiple first round picks back, I think, for that to be a good idea.
I'm not saying I'm advocating for it, and I agree with you. I don't think it'll happen, but the contract's not an impediment to that. It's about whether or not, and remember with this, the factor that comes into this situation with the Niners that could be sort of the X factor on the owner's side of this looking at Shanahan is money, contracts, how that stuff has been set up. Shanahan has been essentially the de facto general manager there, i.e. he's telling him, hey, get this deal done, put down this to a bare minimum, put that to a bare minimum, stuff it all in bonus. Well, you ask an owner to take all those hits and to have that much money on the books into the future, and yet you don't have a Super Bowl title and you look like you're regressing a little bit. Maybe that owner makes a call and says, hey, let's, especially with a $60 million Purdy tag coming into potentially into places, we're hearing Purdy wants to be paid.
Oh, yeah.
You go, well, I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but could I see the Niners getting to the end of the season and turning it over for a few weeks and really thinking about the situation and potentially getting there? Maybe. But I'm not saying I'd be betting that he'd be going, but there's definitely an open door there to where I don't think you're getting multiple first round picks. You probably get a first round pick, maybe a third rounder in addition to it, if you're moving it. But you could get that for a coach. And if, let's say you're going to hear from a Niner standpoint, Brendan, that Trent Williams is going to retire this offseason. Does that change your outlook? Does that, your look on that? Well, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be a pretty bad division next year, man. When you really think about it, it could be like a division where the Rams bottom out because Stafford retires and the Niners bottom out because they lose a lot of their good top blue chip players. It could be a pretty bad division. I'll say that when you think about it.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I don't, that's why I say I don't think there'll be an elite team coming out of this division next year. I think it'll be where you don't have maybe a bad bottom feeder, Brendan. You're not going to have a 3, 4, 5 win team maybe in the division, but you probably won't have an 11 win maybe team as well in the division. It's going to be maybe one of those kind of seasons, I think.
Mm-hmm. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $5. That Giants loss is just unacceptable. At home now, we just got to win and put in effort and win these last two. Bears first, Rams second. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Be calm. And I can't excuse the Giants loss either. That's one of the more miserable losses in recent years that we've had at home. Just kind of saying something. It was you lost against the Panthers and the Raiders at home, but that one was just ridiculous. To have Daniel Jones, a guy they cut later on in that year, cut you apart on that football field in your house. Couldn't even blame it on, well, the Giants fans took over the stadium. Just no juice on that day from that football team.
Yeah, it'll be 15 years from now. Mike McDonald will have won 3 Super Bowls with the Seahawks. And that Giants game will still not be okay.
No, it'll still be a bitter pill.
Yeah. At least the Raiders and Panthers teams were okay, were like adequate. At least they were real NFL teams. That Giants team is like barely an NFL team.
Yeah, it's an inexcusable loss. And they handed you that game. It's not like they just squeaked it out. So they basically, gave it to you upwards and downwards that game, back and front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Looking back on it, they probably wish they had lost that game. That way they'd already have the number 1 pick locked up.
Probably so.
Be calm, see clearly. Thank you again for the $2. I don't like depending on other teams. So nobody does. You've
had chances this year, be calm. That's the thing about this team is they've had all the opportunities in the world to control their own fate and not have to be in a position here where they've got to hope that some other team that's out of the race and maybe thinking about their vacation plans has got to beat this other team that's going to be highly motivated and knows what's at stake, especially with the Rams where they get this win and they have a bye next week, basically. So I don't like it either, man, but we have no one to blame but ourselves, as we had every opportunity in the book for this to not be the reality of what we're going to be facing.
Yeah. It's not the first time in the last couple of years that we're depending on other teams. We're pretty familiar with it at this point.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say the NFC ended up being kind of a bloodbath this year. We might have a 7 seed with like 11 wins. I even worked out a scenario where the 7 seed has 12 wins. That's kind of crazy.
Very possible this year. The creme de la creme is at the top and the bottom is at the bottom. It's good. There's quite a divergence, I think, in the NFC versus the AFC too on that side of it.
Mm-hmm. Be Calm, See Clearly, thank you for the $2 again. Go Cards and everybody else, we need to win. Go Hawks.
Go Cards, man. Go Cards and everybody else. I agree.
Yeah, well, if the Cardinals win, then it becomes a much simpler matter, right? If the Cardinals win, we don't have to worry about anything else except the Seahawks. If the Cardinals lose, then it becomes this Rube Goldberg-like playoff machine of, trying to get in.
Yeah, I agreed. So, come on, Cards. Get it done.
I mean, they could. I'm not counting them out. The Rams have not played well the last 2 weeks. They've just won, They've scored, I think, 1 touchdown over the last 2 games combined. Like, it's not a perfect team.
And weird things happen in divisional games, familiarity and all that stuff that goes into it. So certainly there's a chance the Cardinals could get it.
John Stillwell, thank you for the $25. John, thank you.
Joey was go ahead.
Joey Galloway is the correct answer.
Yeah, Joey was on my mind there, John. He was one I was thinking about. So certainly there's a bit of a thought there with him, but I mean, he was, he's a good player for us. It didn't go well at the end there where he held out at that final year there, where especially if he'd come into training camp from the jump, and I mean, he wasn't really as much, I think, in a fit to Holmgren's offense with his route running, and it wasn't as kind of exact, I think, as Holmgren would have liked. But he was a guy that I considered, John, before I got to Sherbert on it. So it was kind of in consideration, but
you got 2 first-round picks for the guy, which is insane.
That's true. I think that's probably, to Brendan's point, what made me not go that route is you ended up getting a couple first rounders off of it that you're able to flip for him so that you're able to turn it into something. So I guess that's probably why I didn't kind of go with him quite.
Who did we get with those 2 picks? Was it Sean Springs and
I don't think it was Jones. Was it Jones?
If it was Walter Jones, I think we'd all know that. I think it would be a very well-known trivia answer.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it was Sean Springs and somebody else that I forget, like a tackle or something.
Let me look it up here. It might have been McIntosh is who you're thinking. No, yeah. Sean Alex. Which would produce Sean Alexander and Corn Robinson.
I'm not unhappy with that.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the trade that was the Meyer trade for the Springs. That was I think that's a Rick Meyer trade to the Bears that you got.
Hey, that's a good trade too, actually. John Springs was good.
So Meyer was a Notre Damer, and the Bears GM was a Golden Domer as well. So he used a little bit of the old, go for one of your. Yeah.
Send him the tape from college. Don't send him any tape from the Seahawks.
That's it. And he's like, hey, I got a first round pick for you guys. And we're like, bet.
Joey Galloway was almost the first Seahawk that I really loved, though, because he was the star of the team when I started watching in '96. So maybe I'm not quite able to judge that appropriately. Supremely talented as DK Metcalf is as a wide receiver, I think that there's an argument to be made that Joey Galloway is the most talented wide receiver that you've ever had in Seattle Seahawks history. Probably could potentially in his prime have been even faster than DK Metcalf. I mean, this is a guy that was legit, I think, ran into that 4.2 range of that fast Ohio State track coming out. And he was absolutely electric with the ball in his hands, and fun player, real fun player. Just wasn't quite the Holmgren fit when he came in. Yeah. The first Seahawk that I loved was Ricky Waters, by the way.
Ricky's fun too, man.
I really like that guy. He was fun.
He's one of those backs that, he's going to fight. He's going to give you every inch of his life on every run, and he had a decent amount of talent, but it was a guy that really ran with a lot of heart in how he went about what he did. And always fun, always easy to root for those kind of running backs.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Espionage 206. Thank you for the $1.99. Merry Christmas to you both. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Espionage. Merry Christmas to you as well. And thanks again, John, for that other don't know too. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let's see here. Feed me more. Thank you for the $2. Question: who do you have taking the 1 seed? #Lions.
I mean, probably the Lions at this point, but I do worry about how many guys they have on IR, and you feel like at one point or another that's going to end up biting them. That just it's too many injuries, not enough pass rush. They already last week a Bears offense that's not been particularly good was able to make some headway against this Lions D. So and a lot of teams it seems like have been able to kind of score their share of points. Buffalo a couple weeks ago just went off on them. I mean. It seems like that D is really struggling with how light they are right now. So I'll still go Lions, but not confidently so. And it's hard to say. Eagles had the Jalen Hurts injury last week. How healthy is he going to be going forward? hard to have much confidence on this one. Be me predictable prediction wise.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the Vikings. I
could
think the
see it.
line. And by the way, my heart goes out to Lions fans right now. They have this team that is clearly meant to win the Super Bowl this year, and somebody upstairs just decided, no, you don't get to win the Super Bowl. We're going to injure every player on your defense. You're going to be playing 7th string linebackers off the street. Like,
Can I ask you a question? Do you buy into maybe the thought, and I don't know that I know it's this way, but I'm wondering on this. So, the tough guy football team stuff, like the head coach that wants to run that tough football team, like we're going to bite kneecaps off and we're going to be this kind of team, right? That guy's going to have a tendency to be kind of a grinder out in training camp, right? You want to be tough. We're running Oklahoma drills. We're going to be bashing ourselves in the head. We're going to toughen ourselves up. And then you'd kind of expect that type of team to suffer a share of more injuries than your average team as you get into the depths of the season with it. I'm not saying I know this to be the case with him, but I do wonder a little bit about that in trying to build that mentality so ardently, and that you have to get it to set for a team like that. You've got to oftentimes kind of have them go hog wild in that training camp point like that. And that's a team that can start hot and can be ready to roll, but then those injuries do start to mount as they get wore down a little bit. I think there's anything to that.
Well, are you okay if I'm a little anecdotal here?
Sure.
I remember that's what Vikings players said about that 03 team that I think was coached by Mike Tice. I think that was Mike Tice. And that team started like 6-0 and they were killing everybody. And then they ended up going 9-7 and missing the playoffs. And they said it was because they worked us too hard in practice. We had nothing left for the end of the season.
Yeah.
That was a very talented Vikings team. That was the Randy Moss, Dante Culpepper team. They had they had good pieces, but they fell apart.
Yeah, I mean, they lost to a much lesser talented former Husky Chandler, I think, was the Falcons quarterback at that time, who beat them to go to the Super Bowl. Chris Chandler went to the Super Bowl.
No. That was the 03. That was the team that Josh McCown threw the touchdown against on the last play of the season to knock them out of the playoffs.
There we go. Okay, yeah,
the famous one.
I'm mixing up my underwhelming Viking teams.
Yeah, the Vikings team that you're thinking of was 98, right?
Right.
Yeah, 98. The 15-1 Viking. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Boy, that's a team that underperformed for a few years there.
Mm-hmm. Sloby1, thank you for the $2. Sam Darnold is greater than something invisible, I guess. He's playing pretty well. I think he's heavily dependent on that play action game that they have in Minnesota, which is very, very good.
Yeah, he's having a good year for the first time in his career. He's looks like the light bulbs come on for him a little bit. Sloby1. I think he's probably at the end of the day, to me, still I put him as a top 15 quarterback in the sport. I don't know if I'd go full to top 10. Maybe he's playing like top 10 this year, but I don't know if that's something that's repeatable year in and year out with him. But I think he's playing around top 15-ish area, probably 12, 13 in the grand scheme of things. Which he's not making mistakes. He's using his legs, working off script just enough, working on script really well with McConnell and what he's asked him to do, to Brendan's point on the play action stuff. But part of its environment, I think, there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to eat into that rotten cheese. And he's going to ask for money, right? He was the number 3 overall pick. He's going to get every dollar he can this offseason. And I don't think it's going to be this is not going to cost $1. No.
Let the Titans sign him, man. I don't want the Darnold experience. I don't want to pivot to that. It doesn't make any sense to me looking at it. Just let him go somewhere else. He's fine, but no, thank you.
Can we break a little bit of Seahawks news here on stream here? We just got something across the wire. Ken Walker has been placed on IR, and unless the Seahawks make the NFC title game, his season is over.
There you go. So Walker misses off another 4, 5, 6 games this year. Lost. Got highly injured quite a bit. Certainly, you're not giving him an extension this offseason. No way, no how that can happen. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing he'll come back for the final year of his rookie deal at this point when it all plays out with it. But he's frustrating at times on a couple different ways where we just can't feel like we get. For a guy who's a high second round pick, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that running backs get hurt a lot in this league, but he's getting to the point now where if this keeps up much longer, we're just going to have to acknowledge that there is no second contract. And
yeah,
frustrating. He never got hurt in college.
Yeah, I know. And it's the same thing John Schneider did with Penny. And this is again a learning experience with Charbonnet and to me Walker here in a big time way. And we'll see if Schneider learns his lesson on this, or if he just decides like, no, these were wrong, but the next ones will be right, doing the definition of insanity. But it's not worked out taking 2 second-round picks high. It's not created an offense that's a juggernaut. You've not gotten insane production out of either of these two guys. The approach has got to be you build your line and then you get your running back. You don't get your running back and then build your line. That's an ass backwards way of doing it. And part of why you've not gotten the most out of Walker, but there's a big lesson to be learned here is how to approach the running back position in the future for the Seattle Seahawks, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I said this in a previous video, but Ken Walker is going to end this season. We now know his season's over with about 200 touches and less than 900 yards. That's something that John Schneider needs to look at and get really angry about and decide to himself, I'm never going to let this happen again.
Yeah. Well, and again, he did something that was, here's a rule of thumb in the NFL right now. Here's a universal rule of thumb. Here's a universal rule of thumb that just about every NFL team operates off of. And I'm going to go counter to that. I'm so much smarter in my process, and we're so much smarter in how we do it here that we're going to run counter to how everyone else does it, which is fine. That's it. It was a plan and I was in favor. And I said, okay, let's see how this experiment plays out. But it's been a failure. It's a failure of an experiment. And you blew 2 second-round picks out the door by trying to run this up the flagpole to see if the flag would fly. It's not flown. It's not going to fly. I'm not saying cut Kenneth or cut Charbonnet or move somebody. I mean, there's no real trade value for Kenneth at this point if you even wanted to try to move him. You run him out in the next year of your thing, but you don't give money to running backs and you don't pick running backs high unless you've got the offensive line in place. That's the way that works. It's an easy formula. This isn't complicated. This isn't hard. Schneider's got to slam his head into the desk, reset the calibration in there, and understand this is the way we got to go into the future at the position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to be clear here. I'm not mad at him for trying. Like the Ryan Grubb hire, I want to say this. I don't think it's working. I'm not mad at him for trying to swing for the fences. I'm not. I think that was a move that is worth trying, but it's not working. There's a difference between that and hiring, if we had hired somebody like, Jim Tom Sula, where I would have said, okay, that was DOA. That was just a dumb decision. I don't think it was a dumb decision. It's just a decision that didn't work. And now you need to do something else.
Yeah, I agree. This is part of why I come to that spot we talked about earlier of not being exactly on John's on the hot seat for me. I don't quite view it in that lane of things. But to your point on this, what I want to see from you is that not that you're not going to make mistakes. As a general manager, you will make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, no matter the best of the best. But do you continue to make the same mistakes, or do you correct the behavior and see where your errors are at? See where you've got that fatal flaw that's hurting you, like the offensive line and how he's addressed that over the past 10 years. You've also done some falsely inflating of the running back position. You made a running back a first-round pick a couple of years ago that had everybody scratching their head going, why are you drafting a running back number 1 overall? You got Carson already there. And then you paid Carson when you already had Penny. And you've given out money to a bunch of other guys, and it hasn't worked out for you in those cases. And all those cases, be it an Eddie Lacy or the third contract that you gave to Marshawn Lynch or the deal you gave to Chris Carson, you didn't have a good line built up in front of it. So the lesson is there for you to learn here. It's been there for you to learn multiple years over from John Schneider's perspective. Is he going to pick up the piece of paper and read it this year, or is he just going to keep transitioning in that same kind of direction of this as we go into the future with this position? When you pivot off Walker and you go right back to another second rounder the next year after. It's like, well, that's what I'm looking for is correct the behavior, fix it, address the offensive line this season. Stop putting all these assets into the running back position as you have at times.
Yeah. Yeah, and Walker, there are problems. Like there were a couple plays in this game where I thought he left yards on the field, but that is still a very talented player. And I think that if you built the right stuff around him, you would get some pretty phenomenal results out of him. So build that team that can get those phenomenal results.
Comes back to the offensive line time and time again, man. All roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to the offensive line.
Mm-hmm. Dylan Sosa, thank you for the $4.99. Why on earth are our number 3 and number 4 corners on our opponent's best receiver? Please make it stop. I don't even know if Trey Brown's in the top 4. He might be the 5th corner on this team right now.
Maybe. Possibly. He's had his worst year of his pro career. Not a fit into this defense in the least. And had one of the more boneheaded plays of the year, which is saying something, to where you line up offsides because you want to get too close in press coverage. I don't know if I've seen that in a long time in the sport.
I remember D4 doing it for the Chiefs in the AFC title game against the Patriots.
But that's
the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's a defensive lineman, though. You get them; they're trying to always push that line a little bit. But for a corner, and he did it because he got tiny little arms and he's trying to press, and he's worried about not being able to get his press landed. So he's trying to get right up in the grill. So it's, that's where to me it's easier, because they can do the thing that the receivers do, where they look over at the official and they do the point move.
Yeah.
And the official goes like this or goes like this, and then they correct themselves back quickly prior to the snap. But if you want to be lazy and just walk up there and press it without looking, that's what he did.
Yeah, Trey Brown after the game claimed that he tried to get clarity from the official and the ref wasn't giving him anything. So somebody went back and looked at the tape. He never looked at the official. So not a good look for him there either.
No, I mean, and I didn't see his head turn over. So you're looking at
it didn't.
That's So it's like, it's so easy to do that. You come up, you're like, I'm going to press this a little bit. Just look over. Am I okay? You're okay. Very easy, very quick to do. He didn't do it. That's again why it makes it hard for me to just, excuse it or understand it.
Yeah, I will say it's probably a bad idea to have Trey Brown trying to cover Justin Jefferson anyway. So I think that, you could also put a little bit of that on the coaches. Like, that's a bad situation to have a not even good cornerback in. But, there's a lot of blame to go around right now.
Well, that's why Dylan will be nice if, he's not in there, and the first touchdown in there, you got Woolen out there if he didn't miss the team meeting or whatever caused him to be suspended. I don't know why they didn't. Supposedly this offseason, we're supposed to have Tariq Woolen traveling with wide receivers. I guess that part stopped now. You don't have him traveling with the number one. Yeah, I guess.
So maybe it's because he's not playing well. Maybe they just feel like if we do that, he's going to get destroyed.
Could be.
Romy, thank you for the $5. Should we spend big money in free agency on a guard like Tevin Jenkins or James Daniels to ensure we don't have to worry so much on OL in the draft? It depends on the kind of money that you can clear up in the offseason. I don't know if you can afford it, but if you can, I think you're obligated to, because there's too much to fix in one draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can go sign a young guy out there in free agency, Jenkins is a guy, he's got some injury concerns with him. He's going to cost a lot of money. I do like Romy and going at him. I'm not as familiar with James Daniels. But with Tevin Jenkins, you get a left guard. Left guard is a really hard position to find. I mean, drafting linemen's hard anyway, but you'll find a good amount of right guards. You just don't find many left guards, or quality ones at that. So to be able to take care of that before the draft would give the Hawks probably a lot more confidence they could find some more help for right guard, more help for center, as they get into the draft at that point. So that sets the stage up a bit easier if you can go get Jenkins. Probably Trey Smith's a more talented, better player at right guard, but then that does open up to it making it a little bit tougher to then deal with left.
Yeah, I think Atlanta's losing a guy this offseason. Is it Dahlman? I think he's a free agent. Drew Dahlman. I think he's a free agent. Yeah. So somebody like that could work. There are guys, not a lot, but there are some.
Yeah. I'm okay with, and definitely that's been the place, Romy, that they've avoided in this last 10-year period. You haven't signed, going back to Robert Gallery about 14 years ago, was the last high-priced free agent offensive lineman that you spent money on. So John, much like trading up in the first round of the draft, this is just a road that he doesn't like to go down. But I would certainly advocate for it, because you've gone cheap. You've seen what that can do. You can see what guys in their mid-30s like Gabe Jackson and Laken Tomlinson and these type of players they've signed over and over again that haven't worked. You've gone bargain basement and you've gotten bargain basement play. So maybe their thinking here could be, hey, go for a little more top end, and you might get top end play with it.
Yeah, and well, okay. One thing I want to have a quick conversation with you about, just to see where you are on this, because one sentiment that I've seen from a lot of Seahawks fans over the past couple months is our mistake was not keeping Damian Lewis. Like, we should have kept Damian Lewis. And I struggle with that one because I just don't think he was that good last year. And I don't think that would have been that much better than what we have right now. I think we had to dream a little bigger.
Yeah, I think if you really look at the end of the day with Laken Tomlinson and Damian Lewis, Lewis gives you a marginally little bit better play. I don't think he's setting the world on fire versus Laken. And I that's a much more increased cost for Damian Lewis versus what you have there with Laken. The other part of this is that you're going to a mobile-based scheme, and you usually want to, like when you bring in an OC, have usually linemen, or at least set the stage if you're going to sign a contract extension to a lineman for 4 or 5 years and make that commitment to him. If you want to have your OC there in that time, that you're getting linemen that fit to that guy's scheme. Damian Lewis didn't fit to Grubb's scheme. He's not a mobile-based lineman. He is the opposite of a mobile-based offensive lineman. So he wouldn't have fit to the new scheme and what it was asked to do. Those tunnel screens that we want to see, that's not going to be him. He's not getting out in front of those. That's the place that he's a detriment on. So, no, I don't think that it would have been gone to spend $13 million for Damian Lewis, who wasn't a fit for this offensive line scheme, for a guy that gives you about average play, by the way, for that $13 million a year. I don't think that that's smart roster construction.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like there's been some revisionist history in this fan base about how good Damian Lewis was. He was inconsistent. He had 2 good seasons and 2 pretty bad seasons. And I don't know. I feel like you got to go a little bit bigger here.
Yeah, I'd much rather, to your point on this, Brendan, if we wait a year later and you're spending $20 million a year for Trey Smith this year versus having that $13 million of Damian Lewis on the books, preventing you from going and making a run at a Trey Smith, or even Tevin Jenkins, who does have the injuries, but to me is a better player than Damian Lewis and a pure fit for this scheme. A guy that played tackle in college, who's transferred to left guard at the pro level. So he's got that mobility stuff you're looking for at the guard. That's to me that's the lane we want to be in here, not in this take a square peg, force him to round hole because he's kind of gives you a league average ability in his play and what he brings. That doesn't seem to be the smart path to go with.
Just wanted to talk about that a little bit because it's kind of confused me with this fan base lately.
Well, they're desperate to find a functional offensive line, and I get where they're coming from on that one. That's for sure.
Feed me more. Thank you for the $2. The Lions just got Teddy Bridgewater, so who knows? I think this is in reference to the Hendon Hooker thing we were talking about earlier. They did. I thought that Bridgewater wanted to come back to the NFL. I didn't know he had. Fascinating.
Yeah, I didn't know he had. I thought he was coaching at this time. I thought he was out there actually doing the coach deal.
Well, he won the championship, and I know he said, now that I've won the championship, I want to come back to the NFL, but I didn't know he was already back.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that either on it. And I mean, maybe it's possible that they open it. I just, with Hendon Hooker, guy's torn his ACL before. His value is going to be at the highest where it's going to be a buyer's seller's market from the Lions perspective, because there's not a lot of quarterbacks out there or guys that can be looked at like this. You know what? You're going to give up a 2nd round pick at that point for Hendon Hooker? I mean, does anybody feel confident in doing that and feeling good about that? Is that okay? Hendon Hooker and Sam Howell now duke it out next year. That doesn't elicit a lot of excitement from me.
Yeah, better than giving up a 2nd and 3rd for clipboard Jesus.
Definitely, that part's true. Well, that was a brutal trade.
Yeah, I was looking that up recently. I was shocked at how much we gave up for him. I had forgotten.
They were a little bit asked. They were definitely not in the right direction on their quarterback and what they were searching in the darkness a little bit on that quarterback situation when Carroll first came through after Hasselbeck left. Yeah,
and they had the guy in place already. Tavares Jackson was much better, and Tavares was actually playing good until he tore his what did he tear? Pec. Yeah, he was actually playing pretty decent. So you had no need to make that trade, and that, looking back, that one is like yikes.
Yeah, it's not a good one, man. Especially with the Matt Flynn money that you then spent a couple years later. So thank God for us.
Yeah.
One second. I'll be right back. 1 second.
All right, no problem. Dogzilla, thank you for the $2. How awesome was the Boz? Well, the Boz was before my time. I'll say that. The Boz was a little before I started watching, so I don't remember him personally. Of course, I'm aware of him. I'm certainly aware of him. We'll wait for Brandon to come back here. Just give me a minute here.
Oh. All right.
Yeah, I was just Dogzilla, $2. How awesome was the Boz? Just talking about Boz for a minute. He was before my time. I don't remember him personally.
One of the all-time greatest college linebackers that's ever played the sport. An absolute monster. He was, a Ray Lewis-like player coming out in what, where the upside could be on that guy. I mean, the upside's undeniable what it could have been. But steroids are a hell of a drug. And steroids were proliferating football in a major way in the 80s that doesn't get really talked about as much, where it was becoming very common. Just here you go, here you go. And steroids are very tough on the ligaments. And so when his shoulders start to break down as he becomes a pro, that's not, well, your body just sort of failed out on you a little bit like Jamal Adams. It's, well, you took the juice and the juice took its bite out of you. And that's kind of how that goes. And it's the way it can play out. But, if he hadn't got injured, if he wasn't maybe supercharged by the juice as much, which certainly probably helped him on the football field in addition to that, the guy had all the talent that you could look for in the world. Tremendous blitzer, awesome tackler, big for good size for the position, ran like a horse, hit like a truck, played with a nasty, mean demeanor that didn't care. Like he was looking to disrespect you on the field. But unfortunately, those shoulders were done by the time he became a pro.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a Brian Bosworth movie? I'm looking at his filmography right now. Have you ever seen?
Yeah, the one with Lance Hendrickson's a good movie. Stone Cold's a legit. I don't know if it's aged well. I don't know if it's aged well, but that's the only one worth watching. Because that's the one where you actually had like a legitimate budget, and you got Lance Hendrickson in there chewing up the scenery as a baddie. But it may not have aged well. It was pretty. It was a flick it on, watch it on an afternoon, and forget about it kind of flick. And he wasn't bad in it for being a football player or actor. So yeah,
he was in the remake of The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler, which I have seen. So that would be mine that I've seen. I don't remember him in it. It's a cameo.
I never was interested in watching the new one because Sandler it's just kind of the wrong tone for like Sandler movie tone for The Longest Yard. I like the Burt Reynolds old flick and how that was done. And it wasn't done for this like goofy, Sandler. And I don't mind Sandler. I like Sandler, but just everything's a goofy throwaway kind of joke to it, and like, it makes his movies kind of feel disposable sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the thing that was fun about the original was Burt Reynolds was actually a quarterback. He actually played college football. Where was he? Was he Florida State or something?
Yeah, exactly. And there was kind of an air to it of like, there's that whole thing of between the prison guards and the prisoners. And there was a little bit more of that tension that was there within that versus it gets played more for laughs with the Sandler one, right? Where there's more speaking to something here with a little bit more of it's lighthearted, but there's a seriousness to it on the other side of it that gave it a little bit of a realness to where Sandler stuff's just always sort of paper thin.
Yeah, I read a review once of the remake of The Longest Yard, and it basically said, how would you feel if they remade The Godfather with Will Ferrell playing Michael?
That's it. That's it. It goes to this goofy place, which was not what the other one was about. The other one had some laughs and there's some moments in it, but it's tonally different from a Sandler movie. And every Sandler movie's got tonally the same thing going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, except for Uncut Gems, which is actually really good.
Well, that's not a Sandler movie though. He ain't directed it. He ain't got his finger because every movie he does has got his fingerprints on script, directing, and all that. And that was one that was completely removed.
Right. Be calm. Thank you for the $5. Sean Alexander can do no wrong at all. He's a king to me, and I had Madden 07. So Sean is like a football god to me. Go Hawks.
Let's go. Hey, hell yeah.
Yeah, he is a guy that I think this fan base has forgotten about.
Yeah, he's a complicated story, Sean. There's a lot there with him, and I done a video on my channel about Sean for this reason because he's such a complicated figure. One of your only MVP in Seattle Seahawks history, and a real to me example of how running backs come in all of these different shapes and sizes, and we like to think of backs, I think, almost in the sort of this, they're one of 5-6 type things, right, Brendan? To me, it's like, no, they're one of like 150 types in varying different assemblies of skill sets that they can have, from the vision to the balance to contact balance, to the type of moves they might have in the open field. And Sean was a guy that might not have had those set skills you look at as far as like, oh, does he got the cool juke move? Does he got a awesome spin move? Does he stiff arm the guy to the ground? Is he super, super fast with it? And it wasn't with him. It was really, vision and glide and contact balance and the ferocity he ran inside the red zone, which I still maintain he ran harder inside the red zone than Marshawn Lynch at his most beast mode. Alexander was beyond that when you got him inside the red zone. Now between the 20s, it was a different story. And this is where we get to the difficulty with Sean, is that there's some blemishes there too on the other side of it. But as a runner with the football, as a guy who's got as good a vision as I've ever seen for a running back, and his ability to find the hole, be it way over here on the backside or stay in front side or just picking it slightly over, he was really good in that realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the greatest vision of any running back ever, maybe.
Yeah, I think you can make certain argument about that, because I don't think he was necessarily really physically gifted. He was a bigger back that had really good size for what he could do, but that vision really was next level, and his anticipation with the vision, the anticipation of the hole to open up rather than needing to see it open up, but knowing by the way the flow of the play is going, this thing's going to go open here to the backside. He was a master of that.
Absolutely. And thank you, Be Calm. Let's see here. Ocean Hills, thank you for the $2. Russell Wilson over Geno Smith at the same price next year. Right. So Wilson is going to be a free agent this offseason as of right now. I can't imagine him in this offense. Like, he's a terrible fit for JSN. If we bring back Grubb, he's a terrible fit for Grubb. He'd get sacked like 9 times a game behind this offensive line. That's something you do if you want to go 0-17, I think.
Yeah, Ocean Hills detailing. There's going to be a lot of people, I think, to your point on this, that are going to probably make some noise for wanting to see Russell Wilson return this offseason, especially if you don't go back to Geno Smith. I think that there's a lot, though, that prevents this from happening. Russell Wilson, over the past 2 years with both Denver and Pittsburgh's, had a much better offensive line to deal with, and allowed to some of the warts that have grown in his game over time, which aren't warts that are some deficiency, but just as he's aged, things that have gotten lesser from his ability list, is going to be put on brighter display here. And those pass protection issues you have, he's not going to do well behind that stuff. And the fact you have Grubb here, that's a lot of that stuff's going to be on time and needing to hit those short routes and get the ball out of your hand. That's never been Russell Wilson's game. It's never been his game. So I think if you put him here, you're putting him in an environment where very much he could be likely to fail as much as succeed, as just his skill set doesn't match to what we have here as well.
Yeah, I'd argue Pittsburgh is the perfect team for him right now, and he's still kind of failing. Like, I don't know if you were on X yesterday, but every Steelers fan wants to burn his house down right now. They hate him. Like, I was looking through X, and I know those fans get reactionary. I know people freak out about stuff that is unwarranted sometimes. I mean, I see it in my own fan base every single day, I feel like, but like they want to ride him out of town on a rail already. And this is the third team now that has driven he's driven the fan base insane. I don't want to be on that train again.
I don't either. And moving on from Pittsburgh, and they said, no, we're good on that, where, they know they could probably get him under a real low end contract and then have their quarterback situation taken care of. But I don't know that they're necessarily going to look to do that. And a guy said coming in this year, he's restricted in what he can do, Ocean, in that he's got to be in a low volume passing attack. He's got to do under center stuff. It's got to be play action rollouts, limiting the attempts, working off the running game, forcing him to use his legs as much as you can get him to use it in the open field. And even then, you're going to be a bit restricted on the true productivity. You can get efficient play, I think, at that point, but you're not going to necessarily get highly productive play from the position on that point. So it's kind of is where it is with Russ on his career on this, where he's not a bad player, but he's going to take you back over the top. Is he going to help you with a roster that's got some holes to be able to overcome that where he's at in his career? Probably not at this point.
Yeah, I think he should retire this offseason. I think this should be it. Like, I don't need to see him deteriorate to the point where he is legitimately a terrible quarterback. Like, I use this comparison sometimes. Everybody knows, or most people know, that Jerry Rice played his final actual football with the Seahawks in 2004, right? I think most of us know that. That's not actually where his career ended. He actually signed with the Denver Broncos that offseason, and he didn't even make the roster with one of the worst receiver cores in the league. Denver's receivers that year were atrocious, and he still didn't make the team. And then he had to retire. And it's like, I was a teenager watching that happen. And even I knew then that was sad to see the greatest receiver of all time deteriorate to the point where he couldn't even make a team. And, I don't want to, we don't need to see Russell Wilson get to the point where he gets thrown out of the league. Leave the league with some dignity,
I would agree with that too. He may end up in Vegas next year, though. We'll see on that, because he is not a guy that catches me as one that's going to be like, oh, okay, I read the room on this one. I'll let it. He's kind of an optimist on that. And I think he'll keep letting it roll.
Right. So also while we're here, let's also mention that Russell Wilson did not leave because Pete Carroll wanted him to. He left because John Schneider wanted him to more than anything. And John Schneider is still here. So I'm pretty sure John Schneider wouldn't go after Wilson, even if it would be a technically prudent idea. I think there's a lot of bad blood there.
Yeah, well, I don't think we know for sure he doesn't like Russell Wilson's agent, Ocean Hills. And then there is the rumors of him potentially trying to get Carroll and Schneider fired. Behind closed doors. Not any confirmation of that, but there's been some amount of rumors.
It probably happened.
Yeah,
if it
probably did.
And Carroll and Schneider would have come out and said, no, that didn't happen. They came out and said, yeah, that happened.
Yeah, I would have thought that they would have denied it if it hadn't.
Yeah.
Too, which they
the only
didn't.
Person who's denied it is Wilson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which I understand.
Yeah. I mean, he has to say that. That's a really scummy thing to do, to go over the head of your head coach and GM and try to play owner. That's bad.
True.
Mm-hmm. R. Sanchez, thank you for the $2. Darnold is Castle 2.0. That's not, there's some truth there. A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they're different players for sure. Donald's definitely got more mobility and arm strength, but modern day Castle, Sanchez, sure, I'm with it. And I always, if you're going to draft a guy in the draft, you're drafting a guy high for 1 year production. Oof. Well, that's not a good way to go. We've learned that in recent years past. A guy like Mitchell Trubisky, for instance. Same thing I think is true for a quarterback who's bounced from 4 different teams. Finally now in this year is having this kind of year like he is, with some really good supporting cast, with a really smart offensive mind, with a defense that's playing really good football on the other side of it. I think there's some caution. There's some tap your brakes on that one before you buy in on that one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can, maybe Case Keenum's a decent comp as well. Case Keenum had one really great year for Minnesota a few years ago, and that was it.
He did indeed. It could be something a little bit like that too as well. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he ended up giving Case Keenum any real big money. I don't think, but right. I do think somebody's going to give Darnold the money, and I just don't want to be that team to make that mistake.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here, John Stillwell with the $100.
John, hell yeah, brother!
$100. Wow. Okay. Big one coming through here for all your good work. Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
John, man, thank you so much for all you do for both of our channels on that side of it, brother. You are amazing in all of your support. You help to keep us both going on our sides of it, man. So thank you so much for that, John. One of our biggest donator on our channels here, and again, big part of helps what makes us do what we do here, folks, is this kind of support. So thank you for that, John.
Yes,
you're awesome, man.
Very appreciated.
Really appreciate it.
Ryan, thank you for the $1.99. Was it PC or JS who didn't like drafting OL? Well, probably a little bit of both. I mean, Pete Carroll's a defensive guy, probably doesn't love drafting offensive players in general. And John Schneider, we've seen there might be a little bit of, I mean, he said it, right? He's it out of his own mouth. He doesn't value interior offensive linemen as much as other people.
It's a deep question, Ryan. It's so much to unpack, this question, unfortunately, because all of things with football, nothing is ever simple. When Pete Carroll and John Schneider were here in the early part of their regime, they spent as much money as anybody in the NFL in the offensive line. When Russell Wilson walked in the door, you had the highest paid offensive line in the sport, with a top 10 pick at left tackle, with a first round guy that you draft out of Alabama and James Carpenter, who was moved to guard. So then what happened? Why is it that when they walked in, they had this lesson that they learned, and then they unlearned the lesson with time? Why? Well, because you have in Coach Carroll a guy that's a defensive mind that wanted to return over the Legion of Boom, and in returning over the Legion of Boom, he had to dump a heavy amount of investments into that. But at the same time, you're making your quarterback a top 5 paid quarterback in the sport, and hey, the salary cap is a finite amount of space. This then means that you got to go cheap somewhere. You got to pick somewhere you're going to go cheap. They didn't want to go cheap on the skill position players. They didn't want to go cheap with the running back position. You got to pick somewhere. Coach Carroll's not going cheap on his defense. Where do we go? Offensive line, right? Paying quarterback, defense is getting all the other resources, nothing left over for the offensive line. That's why it went cheap for a 10-year period. Why does it continue to go cheap now? Because over this 10-year period, you've got these spread systems that have proliferated the college scheme. Every college offense now is playing patty cake and pass protection, snap after snap after snap. Nobody is committed to running the football. This has eroded the development of offensive linemen when it comes to getting to the pro level and you asking them to do those type of things. John's faced that decision and said, well, I don't want to take lesser. I don't want to take a less advanced prospect versus another position where that guy is advanced, where he is capable. And this has led us now to the current situation. Right.
And it's a very important offseason to resolve this because, I'm not asking for John to way overextend himself to fix this. I'm not asking him to take a 4th round player in the 1st round or anything like that. He doesn't have to Jermaine Ifedi this, but you might have to overextend yourself a little bit to fix this. And if you do, then you do. So hopefully we learn that John Schneider is capable of adjusting based on what he's seen over the last few years with this team.
We'll see. It's been he's stayed in this lane, and I think that he just doesn't trust in that development coming out, Ryan, where I just think he looks at him like the guys that are from the 2nd to the 6th round are all very similar in their talent ability. Me and Brendan might say this guy in the 2nd round, we like him a lot better, but from John Schneider's perspective, he says a Cooper Beebe is really close to a Sa'atoa Lamea. So why do I go get that Cooper Beebe in the 2nd round? If I think Lamea is the same in about that 6th round territory, I'm just going to wait. And that's where he's decided he's going to go with this. Will he change his ways this offseason, Ryan? We'll see, but that's how the genesis of that has occurred.
Feed me more. Thank you for the $2. We stacked the box. It worked. Why didn't we do more? Well, in order to stack the box, you have to get the other team into must-pass situations a lot of the time. And that is dictated by game flow. So some days you're not going to be able to do it as much, I would say. But it's also possibly because he doesn't feel like he has all the right players to do exactly the way he wants to do them.
The offense, the NFL, the Seahawks team in general, Feed Me Seahawks is a commonality of what you see this year, be it on the offense or defensive side of the ball, does a lot of counterintuitive things. Counterintuitive meaning I don't have an explanation. This would be the straightforward way you'd expect them to do something. This is what you'd think they would do. They do this instead. I have been very unimpressed at times with McDonald, and I'm impressed with him overall, but unimpressed with sometimes his lack of urgency defensively or his lack of aggression defensively. He sometimes plays it very extra safe, almost towing very closely to the line of a former coach Carroll in this respect of things. I don't know why at times, in my perspective, I don't know why he trusts so much into that front four to be able to generate pressure consistently when they have not been able to generate pressure consistently this year. I thought this game, you had your best success when you went to stack boxes and creative fronts. You just chose not to do it. So I don't have a good explanation for it, Feed Me. I thought he should do it too. He just doesn't.
That first drive on the defense was very Carroll-like to me. I even tweeted about it during the game. I was like, nice of Pete Carroll to show up to coach the defense on that first drive. So, I imagine things will get accelerated next year, but we talked about this last week. We were talking about how hey, maybe this defense should just go for broke. Maybe they should just start stacking the box on early downs. Didn't really happen. I didn't expect it to happen, but it's an idea.
I'm so tired of the 4-man front and the dropping everybody into coverage crap and just getting slowly bled to death. And we had to deal with this for years with Carroll, and it looks like McDonald's kind of got some of the same vein thing going on. And maybe it is he just needs his right players going on. And ultimately, I do have success in him, but I really am tired of sitting on our effing heels every single week defensively and just getting it taken to us where other teams take it to us downhill. I thought the real key moment in this game was early on in this game where you had a 3rd and 2 from the Minnesota Vikings. And what do you get from McDonald? 4-man fronts, 2 linebackers, 6 up at the box. Vikings see that. They're going to run down on that all day. You instead on the other side of it, when you are on offense and you're in a 3rd and 2, did the Vikings get safe? Did Flores get all worried? Did he get scared? Or did he bring a stack box and then he forced you to false start? And then you false start and now you're in a 3rd and 7. And guess what? You didn't convert the 3rd and 7. But they were able just with that stack box to force you back 5 yards without doing anything on the play itself. And that's the part that's been frustrating for me on this defense at times this year is when we've gotten beat, it seems like we're getting beat by being playing not to lose kind of mentality, which is exactly how our defense has been in prior years under Coach Carroll.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair. I think our blitz rate is still bottom half of the league. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I'm willing to bet our blitz rate is low.
Yeah, I don't really get it. It's been the most unimpressive part to me of the McDonald defense is the feeling at times of, we're just going to just make you earn it. You're just going to make offenses will do that. They're not looking for the deep play 24/7. They'll do that to you. What? Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably not going to get fixed this year. All we can do is hope that next year it's better. As fans, that's all we can do. We're just along for the ride.
Amen.
Be calm. Thank you for the $5. Too young for Steve Largent, but old enough to have witnessed how amazing Walter Jones was, and BTW Sean Alexander should be in the Hall of Fame. Go Hawks. I think Steve Largent announced his retirement the day I was born because my dad saved the sports section in the newspaper from that day, and I've read it.
There we go. Yeah, Largent was awesome. I think he's the best Seahawk of all time. And Alexander Hall of Fame, it's gonna be hard for him to get in. I think. Be calm. Because
I would put him in. I would put him in. I think if you win an MVP and you have a good career, you should get in. No questions asked.
That's a fair assessment with it. It might be a little bit harder for me to quite get to that place of it myself with it. When you look at a lot of the running backs around him in the years, they had, guys that even had, I think, 2,000-3,000 more career yards than him that still haven't gotten into the Hall of Fame. Hard to put him in over the top of those guys at that point, but I can understand the argument.
I mean, they put Jerome Bettis in the Hall of Fame, and all he ever did was not get hurt. All he ever did was grind out his 3.7 yards per carry or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I probably wouldn't have put Jerome Bettis in either, quite frankly. But Jerome Bettis also has 13,662 yards, and Sean Alexander has 9,300. That's a 4,000.
I thought it was more than 10. Huh? Okay.
Don't think so.
You might be right.
9,453 yards. So I mean, that's a 5,000 yard difference, 4,000 yard difference between the two on that. So I mean, it's.
But I think peak means more. Peak should matter more than longevity, though. For me,
I mean, maybe you're supposed. The whole thing used to be you got to have 10 years of dominance to get in the Hall of Fame. That used to be the marker. Not you have a peak of 5 years and that gets you in the Hall of Fame, which seems to be the new thing with it. Is if you have 5 years and that's good enough now. To me, I don't want it to be the Hall of Good, in my opinion. And you start making the argument that this guy gets in. I think there's a lot of other guys you can start to make the argument they then have to get in with it. And I don't want to start going down that road, in my opinion, with it. And, you talk about Bettis being, Bettis averages 3.9 yards per carry. Sean Alexander averages 4.3 yards per carry in his career. So you can hammer on Bettis if you want a little bit on that low yard per carry average. But Sean, when it was all said and done, 4.3 ain't, amazing. It's all right.
There's a significant difference there.
The other part with Sean, that's the part that I tend to find with people that are pro Sean that they don't quite remember on, and the part that I just want to remind everybody on too, is that being a running back requires 3 different skill sets. Running the ball is only one of the 3. So how was he as a pass protector? Horrible. Horrible to the point that Mike Holmgren multiple times over called him out for it. How was he as a pass catcher? Well, if it wasn't a screenplay, he had hands of stone. Probably as many drops from the running back position as I've seen from any running back in Seattle Seahawks history. So that's also another factor into what goes into that player too, that we've got to build. And it's not just what you do in running the football.
Yeah, I mean, I get all that. That stuff is definitely true. I think that if you win a league MVP and you have a good career, if you're not, if you're Derrick Rose or something like that, of course, it's different. But if you win league MVP and you have a good career, and he did have a good career, he had 100 touchdowns, then I think you should just get in. I feel like that's reasonable because I care about peak way more than longevity. Like, to me,
the thing I don't like about that is it's non-specific. If you hit this mark and you hit that mark, and then it's not specific about anything else beyond that. And that's to me where in football, the drive that I feel and that I pull away from is when we ever get to simple, whenever we try to find the simple, this is the simple thing. That's always where I will turn away from it because it's a really complicated sport that's never just as simple as this, and that's the whole explanation for it. It's the whole package that's got to be built into it. Also, the supporting card, the fact that you have 2 Hall of Famers blocking in front of you for a majority of your career kind of matters. It kind of matters. And that's another part that just doesn't seem to be factored in at all on the Sean Alexander stuff. And I know the pro Sean people don't want to hear that, but it is what it is. It helped him. It helped him in a big, major way. And when you took it away from him, by the way, he was a shell of his former self. When you remove those 2 guys out of the mix, how was Sean? How did he run? I think I get what you're saying, and it's not a bad argument to be made. I'm not saying that if they put him in the Hall of Fame, I'm going to be angry about it. But I will say that I don't think that there's quite enough there that's been done, and that while those are good marks to have a Hall of Fame career and a good 5-year run of a top end side of things, you had a lot of help around you. You had one of the more brilliant offensive minds in the sport of Mike Holmgren at the time, as well as your play caller, right? And I think you got to kind of build all that into it where it's how much is this individual player being great How much is it the factors in and him being a very talented player that put him to where he was from a productivity standpoint?
Yeah, you can definitely get pretty deep into this. I think I don't doubt it, and there's a reason why he's not in there. It's because this is complicated. If it was easy, he'd be in.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, got to get Mike in there though. Mike needs to be in the Hall of Fame, and he's on the cusp of it now. Like
he'll get in there. He should have been there already. It should not take this amount of time. I mean, if Dungy's in there, Holmgren did more in his career than Dungy did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Holmgren. I mean, Andy Reid came off the coaching tree of Mike Holmgren, and Andy Reid's one of the 5 greatest coaches ever. John Gruden came off of Mike Holmgren's coaching tree, and he won a Super Bowl.
Yep.
Maybe having Gruden come off your coaching tree right now is not a boon in your favor, but technically speaking, as a football coach, it should be.
Yeah, agreed. He got a team to he's gone to 2 Super Bowls and won 1 being Gruden. So yeah, and 2 different teams. So, and that's the thing of Holmgren is he's got 2 head coaches that have been to 2 different Super Bowls with 2 different teams that came off of his, which no other head coach has done that.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. John Stillwell, thank you for the $50.
Woo! John coming in hot today. Let's go, John.
Got to split for a while, but what a pleasure to listen to the best duo covering the team. Congrats. Thank you,
John. Thank you so much, man. You are awesome, brother. No other words to say than just awesome. And I salute you and thank you for all you do, brother. Thank you, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So John probably isn't here right now because he said he was about to leave. But when you see this, thank you, John.
Yep. You're the man, John. You are the man.
Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $5. Tough question for everybody, all fans. Besides Mike McDonald, who stays? I like some of our coaches, but a lot are just meh. Be calm. I love you guys. Input 100.
Thank you. Be calm.
Okay. Obviously, Mike does stay. I mean, there's nothing to consider there.
I think the only 2 guys that are in play here for moving on would be Harbaugh and Grubb. I think everybody else.
Well, Huff, because Huff and Grubb are probably connected at the hip. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Grubb's going to move off of Huff for who, right? He's going to bring in somebody if you're moving off Huff, you're moving off Grubb. I think it's a combination deal. So I don't think you're just going with just Huff to say, well, we got to get that's not going to work. So those are really the 2 guys that I think are the only 2 guys, but I think that there's a lot of heat behind both of them. I mean, if Larry, I don't know where Larry Izzo is right now, but if he's available to bring back for the special teams coach, I would be kind of open to it myself.
I think he's in Washington. I could be wrong.
Might probably be right. With Dan Quinn. A good special teams coach is not going to last long on the open market, so makes sense. So you may be just stuck with it there, but I was talking to EJ Snyder of Bootleg Football yesterday or 2 days ago, and he was actually hearing mid-season some background heat to the fact that Grubb was not going to last. He said that that's quieted down in recent weeks with them finding the gap running scheme, but I don't know that means that there's a ton of confidence there that he comes back necessarily. It could go kind of either way.
I think he's done. I think that he's toast. Like Corbin Smith, who is one of the most positive people on this planet. He tries to keep everything glass half full at all times. Is turned on Grubb. Nemhauser is turned on Grubb. Everybody I follow on X for Seahawks stuff, none of them have anything positive to say about Grubb anymore. It's turned.
Well, and that's where you have a coach too that's multiple times called him out publicly about not running the ball after games. Going, I don't know why we don't run the ball. We should run the ball more. I don't know why our OC's not running it. You want to run the ball. I mean, I don't get it. Like coaches don't do that publicly in that way. And it was kind of like a shot across, I think, Grubb's bow from McDonald's standpoint, where it's like, I've talked to you behind doors on this. I'm going to put this in public. I'm going to get you to go in the direction I need you to go on this. And this last game felt like a petulant child fighting Mike McDonald to do what he needed him to do. I mean, your unwillingness to run the ball was silly in this game at times.
Yeah. I don't get it. If I had to guess, I'd say he has a plan going into the game, and then the game starts and he gets excited, and he just everything goes out the door. It's like, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. He has a plan until kickoff or something.
Certainly possible, man. Certainly possible, but frustrating.
Yeah. But do you think Leslie Frazier might get a head coaching job this offseason or anything like that? No. Like he'll stay if we want him.
Yeah, he'll remain.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I mean, maybe there will be something way, way, way in the background, but It's not worth talking about. Like if we fire our assistant linebacker coach, then, maybe, but I don't think there's any point in us talking about it.
No, and hard to see it coming.
Mm-hmm. Slowby1, thank you for the $2. What cap moves do you think we make this offseason? Draymond's gone. I think he has to be.
Tyler Lockett's gone.
Yeah, Lockett's gone.
Roy Robertson Harris is gone. Both Fants are gone. Rayshawn Jenkins will be gone.
Yeah, Rayshawn's gone. That's a good one. Let me think here. There could be a decision, and there are a couple different decisions you could make with Geno and Metcalf. I don't know what we're going to do there.
Yep.
It could be an extension, which is a cap move because it frees up cap space. It could be a trade. It could be, a few different things can happen there.
Well, you're doing one of the two things that were Geno and DK. It's either going to be a trade or it's going to be an extension with those two guys. Neither of those two guys comes back and plays on the final year of their deal.
I tend to agree. Let me think here. Maybe Nwosu. I'm not convinced on that one. I actually think that Nwosu, what he's doing as a run defender, setting the edge, might actually be valuable to McDonald, and he might want to keep that. I'm not sure.
Possible. Yep. And if you do cut him, you're going to have to create a hole that would fill at some point then, or at least get maybe multiple guys at that point.
I can't think of anything else. But that's a lot of money.
Yeah, no, it's those guys are stock. We're talking $70-80 million of cap space for those guys that we just broke down. As far as flexibility, that goes Slowby1. So that's a significant amount of money there in moves you can make, flexibility, and what you can decide to do.
And by the way, you can tell the Christmas spirit is here. Look at all the donos just keep coming, man. We're going to get to everything, but y'all are feeling very, very Christmas-like today.
I'm going to end up streaming just 26 hours today. I can already see this one freaking coming. Okay, here we go. Let's log it in.
All right. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $2. Keep Sean's name out of your mouth. Nah, I get it.
I understand, man. And I'm not against him. Be calm. I'm not anti-Sean. With me, Sean, be calm. It just comes down to making sure where I kind of see it and all settling out. And if he gets in there, I will applaud and celebrate. I'm not going to be sitting there as a hater saying, he should have gotten in. I'm always will celebrate a Seahawk getting in. And Brennan's argument to be made is a bottom line of that maybe doesn't have the 10 years of dominance, but the prime was a unique prime, high-end prime as you're going to get for the running back position. The touchdowns with it. It should be enough to push him then over that mark. And very well, maybe at some point. I do think B. Colm will probably have to, if he's going to get in, wait till the veterans committee, the veterans thing, where some of the older players have to kind of wait to get in. He might have to wait to that spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably about right. And I don't expect him to ever get in. But I will say this, I'm going to be very unhappy in a few years when Frank Gore's in the Hall of Fame and Sean Alexander's not. Sean Alexander was a much better running back than Frank Gore. Like Frank Gore shouldn't even make the list for the Hall of Fame as far as I'm concerned. He did nothing but grind out respectable seasons over and over. He had like one really good year.
Well, I mean, it's true. He doesn't have the heights that Sean does as far as the 15, 16, 1,800-yard seasons that Sean did. He's got the 1,700-yard year, which is pretty impressive on that, where that's 1,700 yards just on the ground alone. But again, you come down to me on this. I mean, Sean gets 9,000 yards. Frank Gore gets 16,000 yards. Yeah. And you go longevity. Okay. Frank Gore averages 4.3 yards per carry. Sean Alexander averages 4.3 yards per carry. Mm-hmm. So you go, well, no, he was way more dominant. Well, if he was way more dominant and he played a lesser career, shouldn't I see that yard per carry average up much higher over the top of a Gore if he's a guy that's doing it by volume basis?
Yeah, probably. I mean, the yards per carry for Sean are dragged down by the last 2 years here where he was bad, legitimately bad. But that was after he had already had the 5 really special years.
And also after he lost the offensive line talent that was all pros or Pro Bowlers on the other side of it. That also is what dipped with.
Well, really, he lost Hutchinson. Who else did he lose? Didn't he still have everyone
Walter
else?
Walter was done a year and a half out before he was finally done. His knees were done because that was a guy that couldn't take pain pills. So he was trying to fight it out. He wasn't a Toradol guy, right? So he couldn't take any of that stuff. So he just had to, and he was warring. He wasn't the same kind of player down the last probably year and a half to 2 years of it. And so Sean lost both of them essentially at the same time is pretty much how it basically went. And the second that he lost him, his production went into the toilet. And, the bad production is what it is too. You weren't a tremendously old player. You weren't 29 years old when he fell off the cliff. you know, I think, okay, well, you got all those carries, all those touches. Well, okay. But
I mean, to me, Frank Gore is Vinny Testaverde, the running back. It's the same thing. He just kept playing and kept playing and kept playing. I don't think that should be rewarded with a Hall of Fame jacket, period.
maybe not. I don't know. I mean, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have 9,000-yard seasons. Your top season's a 1,700-yard season as far as from the ground goes. You match that up with another almost 4,000 yards that you had receiving through the air, and another 20 touchdowns receiving. I mean, I don't know. I'd have a hard time not giving him the nod on that myself. And that I get that you don't want to give it on the longevity side, but that's almost 10 years of 1,000-yard seasons. That's a hell of an accomplishment for a running back.
I just don't think it should be rewarded in that way when you're talking about the Hall of Fame. I want the peak. I want the peak. Longevity to me is like, it should be rewarded in its own way.
See, I guess we're at the heart of maybe where our disagreement is fundamentally at this spot. You more want to lean into kind of what the guy's done at his peak. And me, I have more favorability to the longevity. And then I think in years past, when we looked at the Hall of Fame, it was the 10 years, and that 10 years that you've been in that spot, rather than it's that you had the 5 really good years. And that this 5 really good years thing, and is a new thing, and guys are getting in on 5 good years. They are now. But this is kind of a new thing in the view of Hall of Fame versus what it used to be in the prior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. I don't think it's a terrible thing, but again, if I were in charge of the Hall of Fame, a lot of the people who are in it would not be in there. I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to put Joe Namath in the Hall of Fame. I think that you would be hard pressed. Honestly, I actually did a study on this recently. I thought that I was looking at every quarterback who's in the Hall of Fame, and I came away thinking, like, what is Jim Kelly doing here, man? Jim Kelly has no place in this Hall of Fame. I was like, wow, there's nothing here that's impressive except the fact that he was on a team that made 4 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, and that's no small thing with that amount of games that you got on it. So and it's a bit of a different era too, as far as how much they were passing versus running and all that other stuff with it. So I can get that a little bit to a degree. I felt like he had a good amount of run though, as far as I think the tough thing that made it hard on him, 11 seasons with Buffalo. So I mean, yeah, he is on a little bit of that Joe Namath territory, I would say, with you too. On I think that my opinion is I would be with you, I think, on the Namath Kelly stuff. I would be just as going to say, well, I'm not as strongly in on those guys making it in as they did. And the quarterback position does get a little bit more benefit of the doubt than it probably should on having more Hall of Famers in there than there should really be.
Okay. Thank you, Be Calm, for your many donations this stream. This is like, what, the 7th or something?
Appreciate you, man. Yeah. Thank you, brother.
Brock Barsanti, thank you for the $4.99. 12 from Chicago here, going to the game tonight. All right. Well, apparently the weather will not be bad at all. So I guess we're okay.
No, I was going to say, brave man, Brock, middle of winter in the Windy City, going out there. And all right, here we go. And he asked, should we trade Woolen?
To trade Woolen the offseason?
Yes, is the answer for me on this. To me, this is as telling a moment on a really tough season that you've had with Woolen, where it's not been bad. There is tackling in certain ways has come a little bit forward from where it's been, but then his coverage has gone backwards this year. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because he should be going to more of a scheme that fits his skill set here with McDonald than it does. I think the last week, and having some sort of team disciplinary issue come up after he had the worst game of what was probably his pro career is kind of that's a lightning point here for me. That's a matchstick moment for me. And I need to move at this point. I'm not going to trust in your development to go forward here into the future.
Could you even get anything for him would be my question.
Yeah. He's a tremendously talented guy that some team's going to look at and say fits to what we want him to do here. And I don't think you're getting a lot, but I think you're getting more than what he's going to give you in-house by having a player that brings the negatives he does to the field at this point.
I'm done with him. I just wonder if you could even trade him. I wonder if anybody's going to bite on that when this stuff is very public. Like, everybody knows that I don't think he likes football very much. I just think he's not into it.
Yeah, could be. And if there's no trade market, then you just roll with him again next and let him duke it out with whoever, and hopefully bring some competition in that can actually push him this next year versus what you have kind of right now in-house. So that's the way that this could go if there's not a market for him. But if there's any kind of market for him, even like a 4th round kind of market, Brock, I would jump on that kind of trade.
I'm down with it.
And have fun at the game tonight. Brock.
Yeah. Marcus, thank you for the $5. Cam Newton, Steve McNair, and Rich Gannon were also MVPs with good careers. That does not make them Hall of Famers either. Absolutely not. Good show. Well,
Agreed.
Cam Newton, I don't know if Cam Newton really had a good career other than the MVP year.
Oh, he had a good career. He just had a great career.
I mean,
that's
for a quarterback, his career was short. I think that if you're comparing him to other quarterbacks, like you see the other quarterbacks of his era have these really long careers. And Cam Newton had like what, 4 good seasons?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a difference there. I think that's not quite the equivalent thing.
No, but I think if we put it into it, I mean, to Marcus's point, Cam Newton, Steve McNair, Rich Gannon, Joe Namath, Jim Kelly. I mean, they're different players, and they all had their different little bit of different skill sets, but the careers all kind of factor out to being the same. It's a good career. It's not a great career. And the Hall of Fame is not about rewarding the good. It's rewarding the great. It's rewarding those true difference makers in NFL history, not the good difference makers in NFL history. And I think it's very important because when you start to water it down, and Marcus, to your point, Eli Manning's another guy I'll throw on top of this. Shouldn't be in there. Probably going to get in there, but shouldn't be in there. It does water it down. The more of these guys that we can talk about, like a Joe Namath or like an Eli Manning, it's the more it lessens what the Hall of Fame really truly is, in my opinion. And that's why you got to be really sure about guys that go in where it really should be, to me, it shouldn't be a debate, Brendan. We shouldn't be having this kind of back and forth like we are at Sean if you're a Hall of Famer. It should just be that they're a Hall of Famer. That's a Hall of Famer. I go Jason Kelce, Hall of Famer. I go Travis Kelce, I go Hall of Famer. You and I aren't going to have any debate with those two guys, right? If we got to get to a place of debating too much, I think that probably tells you that the guy shouldn't go in.
It could. It could. I mean, they put Edgerrin James in the Hall of Fame, and I'll never understand that one. I don't think he should have. Like, to me, that one was like, And
yeah, I agree. Another guy a little bit like Sean, but with different levers, right? From the support standpoint and what you're allowed to do.
Yeah, and also, we don't talk about this, but Cam Newton stole his MVP from Carson Palmer. So there's that too.
I'm with that. He had a hell of a year that year, though. I mean, he was definitely at his peak of his powers that one year. But yeah.
And Rich Gannon's kind of the edge case here because Rich Gannon was kind of a whatever player, very anonymous. He was like, I don't know,
backup for a long
Ryan
time.
Tannehill.
Well, he's back. Not Ryan Tannehill, because he was a guy that was because Tannehill was a top 13 pick in the first round of the draft, right? Gannon was a backup, seemed to be was going to be on a pathway to being a career backup before John Gruden got his hands on him and was able to, basically Geno Smith him.
I don't think you can draw an equivalency between Rich Gannon and Sean Alexander is my point.
No, I wouldn't on that. I think Marcus is more speaking to the mid sort of a little bit better than mid kind of quarterbacks that are being viewed in sort of a Hall of Fame realm of things. Like you said with Jim Kelly or Joe Namath that are, I think, in this kind of vein.
Yeah. Steve McNair's, that's actually an interesting one though. I'd have to look at Steve McNair's career. I don't remember it that well.
It was okay. He was again in a lot of running offenses, and so it didn't have a chance to be highly productive as far as his statistics go. But dual threat guy, got to 1 Super Bowl.
Pancho, thank you for the $4.99. Y'all should do bet props videos for next season for each game. Love the in-depth videos each of y'all do. Go Hawks, baby. I mean, I do have the Bet US stuff, and I do talk about that kind of stuff occasionally, but I don't get super in-depth into it. Maybe next year I could.
Yeah, we'll see if the tough part goes to the ponchos that we both have, I think, 2 different separate sponsors on the bet side, so we maybe have to sync up our sponsors with that to get the right things with that. But I'd be down to do it. We'll talk it over this offseason and see if maybe we can kind of have a segment of it that we can maybe include for the BNB show, our picks of the week or something like that.
Yeah, I don't mind that. It's an interesting idea.
It's a good suggestion, man. Definitely open to doing something like that for sure.
God's Gang, thank you for the $5. Why are people so much against moving DK? Are fans just super nearsighted, worrying too much about today instead of the future? All right, so I was kind of waiting for this one to come up. It hadn't come up yet, but the whole DK thing, which in my Discord server reached a fever pitch after this game, where you had people who just wanted to set the building on fire with DK, and you had people who were defending him. And, it's going to be a fun off season. And by fun, I mean the opposite of fun, talking about DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not a tremendously fun conversation. It's a hard one to have. The viewpoint, as we started off this show, God's game to me, and the place that I start with before I get to individual players or coaches on this team, and this guy go, that guy go, this guy go. My evaluation point coming off this year is that we're not ready to compete in 2025. Doesn't mean that we aren't on the right road. Doesn't mean that we can't compete in the fairly near future, or that we don't have some really good base to work off of here. I just don't think we're quite ready to get there in 2025. With DK Metcalf, he's a guy that I've long said I'm okay with going through the rebuild in prior years and getting through this, because even once we're going to be great, he'll still be a young player at that point in order to maximize him still and be able to be where he's not an old player by the time you're good and now you're not getting the same kind of DK and yet you're paying it that high mark. I'm getting more concerned at the point that we're getting the spot where he's now going to start to get into 28 by next year around December, 29. He's not old, but I have concerns about how DK's game is going to age. I don't know that the route running is coming forward this year like it's been in years past. It feels a little regression. Feels like the hands have had some regression this year. What happens when he loses some of his speed? And that lack of separation is really going to show up because he's not going to be able to lean back on the contested catch stuff that older players who would lose speed like a DeAndre Hopkins can't create any separation. He's got some great contested catch skills. Larry Fitzgerald lost speed into his 30s, still had that great contested catch ability to reel those balls in where he didn't have the separation. I don't know that DK is going to be able to do that. I also don't know if we're going to be in a contending point to really take advantage of him like I thought in prior years. Like I thought we'd be locking in by 2025. So I was going to be okay with putting DK on that extension. Now I've got some hesitancies on this. And this team, like I said at the top on this God's gang, there's so much good that's on this team, but everything that's good's got some negative to it. Nothing can just be good on itself. It's got to have this blemish, this wart on the other side. DK, game-changing receiver, great blocker, draws double teams, very consistently productive over the course of his career every single year, a gamer who shows up every single week. But route running, contested catchability, creating separation, him and Gino being on the same page. After 5-6 years together, it's like this is their first year together, you'd think at times. What's going on there? The ability to utilize him out of the slot and in motion. Has JSN overtaken that now? Where that whole plan that you had in place coming into this offseason was going to be thrown out the door because JSN, we don't want to take his slot snaps because he's so effective there. And we have to take his slot snaps to move DK into the slot and have him in motion and put JSN on the outside. And now JSN's less effective on the outside. It's a lot to turn over, and it's not a clear decision to me. And it should be much more of a clear decision if I'm going to spend $34 million a year on a wide receiver, in my opinion, Brendan. But where do you stand on it?
There's no way I can go to 34 anymore. That's out of the question to me. If he thinks he's going to get the top of the market, I think you have to get
Let's
him.
Call it 32 and a half or 32.
Even that, man, I don't know. I mean, I just, ever since he got back from the injury, and look, maybe he's still hurt, maybe, but he really hasn't done that much since he got back. It was going really good. Then he got hurt. He came back. And since then, I don't think he's had one really big game. He's had good moments, but it is getting frustrating. And then you look at this game where it's the biggest game of the year. You're playing really, really well against a really good team, and he does nothing the entire second half. He's got 0 catches. That bothers me. On a team that does nothing but throw the ball. Like, this is not, a team, this is not the Steelers, a team that just runs the ball over and over again and you never get chances. And then, whatever he did on that last play, which was just either he runs the wrong route or he runs the right route very, very poorly. What are you doing? It's hard to not be frustrated right now. And I'm not on a campaign to get him traded, but I am starting to get kind of fed up with this. He doesn't play like he's his size. He just doesn't. Like, how many times do we see Mike Evans go through a defender to try to make a catch to guarantee he draws the flag? How many times do we see him go up to make a contested catch that DK just refuses to do? It is starting to get frustrating. And I'm open to a lot this offseason. And that's going to be one of the things that I'm open to now. And I wasn't open to it 2 months ago.
I think that's a succinct way of putting it to where I'm probably in about the same kind of camp. I am a pro D guy. He's been my favorite player on the team, but this is a decision that's not just about how good DK is a player and that I like DK and he's been this great player for you. It's about the future, and you're signing to an extension here. It's not about letting him play out a final year of a contract. You've got to make this decision. That's the thing about this, is that it's a major decision to be made. And I've been giving it a lot of thought. And like you say, wasn't in the same place like yourself a couple months ago on this one. It's a thing that has kind of adjusted with time, and it's all of the factors coming into play. It's where DK's at in his game. It's where the team is at. It's where you're at from a cap contract situation as far as salary cap space goes. It's all of it to kind of together to me when I look at it. And I come out the other day and I just look, I'm open-minded to whatever route this team has got to go this offseason to becoming a contender. And if that means a long-term approach, fine. If that means moving this player to get this done, that means fine. They've got to take whatever steps are the right steps to be taken at this point. And that means everything's got to be kind of on the table, in my opinion. Not that you do it, but that the consideration of doing it's got to be on the table to get to that best state as a team into the future. And hard to say on the injury. Like, we don't know. He could have been dealing, by the way, let's give DK some room on this, where that injury side of this could be a big part of this that we're not giving as much credence to, where he's been dealing with this thing and he's nowhere near 100% and he's just being a good soldier out there trying to tough it out. It would explain why he wasn't as able as well to tighten out that route as he was coming out, because I think that would be he's pivoting out to the right. That's on that left knee. And I think it was that left knee that he cranked down on with the MCL.
Yeah, it's possible. And maybe it's Ryan Grubb's fault. Maybe this is Ryan Grubb's fault. And look, if this team decides in this offseason to go, hey, we're going to blame everything on the offensive line and Ryan Grubb, and we're going to replace those two things, and everything else gets to come back, I'm not going to be mad about that. But at the same time, I think DK's doing things of his own volition that are helping this get to this point. I don't know. Is he a top 20 receiver in the NFL right now? I'm not convinced. I think he is, but barely.
Probably about 18, 19 is probably where he is if he is right now from this year's standpoint.
Two rookie receivers in the NFL right now that are better than him pretty clearly, I think. Neighbors and Brian Thomas. That's not right. That shouldn't be happening.
I agree. Yeah, something's not adding up on that.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think that many people are against moving DK anymore. I think some people would prefer to keep him. And there's nothing wrong with preferring to keep him. I think that's a perfectly defensible point of view. It's just you got to start seeing the other side of it at a certain point.
Yeah, I can understand him going both ways. I'm not anti people want to keep him at all. I'm not harping on that he needs to be moved. Just we've got to really look at this whole thing and understand that we're not in the place of being a contender. How do we get there? And this is a big decision this offseason.
Mm-hmm. Rowan G, thank you for the $5. Just popped in, so sorry if 97 people asked already, but what are y'all thoughts on Carroll's interest in being the Bears head coach? It's I can understand the desire to get something stable in there, I guess, because they've had no stability for a while now. But I feel like you're also putting a little bit of a ceiling on things with him.
Yeah, I don't know how you sell the fan base on. We signed his most recent signing at offensive coordinator, a guy in Coach Carroll that went through about 4 or 5 offensive coordinators in his time in Seattle. And the last guy that he brought in, we sent out on a rail about 6 games into being an OC with us. And that, how do we trust him to hire a great staff when we just fired one of his guys? This does feel a little bit to me like, I know Florio said this and he got pushed back on by Schefter, who was like, no, this isn't it, where it does feel a little bit like Carroll's people are trying to kind of get Schefter to present this so that you start to kind of maybe throw your hat in the ring. And he looks at the Bears and he goes, oh, well, I could have Caleb who's like Russell, and I'll build the defense up, and I'll have my Russell who can do the Russell-y things on offense, and I'll run the ball and and I've got I can see why Carroll would want to go there from a fit from his standpoint to it, but I don't see why it would make sense from a Bears standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're not going to be able to get the top guys because the top guys don't want to go coach for that organization. So they just got to take somebody who will take any job. And that is potentially Carroll. Carroll might just be like, hey, give me a job, any job.
It's a good point. And to your point on this, it's an ownership organization that's probably kind of one of your worst organizations in the league. I know the Jones and there's a couple other played Teppers and stuff that we point to, but that's a committee-based ownership group that doesn't have any real singular light driving it. It's also a very cheap organization. That's one of those places where they're turning over the profit margin every year. How much are we getting our profit wise? To your point, this is something that's going to probably hurt you on attracting the most illustrious of coaches, and a guy in Carroll who doesn't maybe have as many options out there on the pro standpoint. This is one of your maybe potential spots that does open in that way.
Yeah, I mean, there were rumors about him maybe going to the Jets, which he's already been the coach of the Jets, and it ended pretty badly. And it's Woody Johnson, and it's a team that clearly is not in a good state right now. So the fact that if he's open to taking that job, that just tells you he just wants to work in football. He doesn't care if it's going to be a disaster. He just wants another job.
Agreed. And that makes sense because I don't think Carroll wanted to go back to college necessarily. I think if USC job was open, he'd go back to that one. But I think that he doesn't just want any college job that's out there. And you're right. I think that there's probably only going to be maybe one or two real true opportunities here. And let's face it, time is kind of the essence here too, right? He doesn't want to sit another year with his age and let the game go by him further. So probably that's going to be pushing this a bit as well.
USC job should be open. I don't know what they're doing there. Maybe they're out of money and they can't fire him because they can't pay two coaches. I don't know, but that's wild to me.
He's making a good amount of money.
Ryan, thank you for the $1.99. Without DK, is JSN the same? No, but there are other receivers like DK that you could get that would have a somewhat similar effect. Like Brian Thomas Jr. is basically a better version of DK Metcalf already. So you got to go get the next Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, I think even if you can't get a guy that's an ultra talented guy that fits to what DK is from a standpoint of being that game changer type receiver, which is probably gonna be hard to find, Ryan, I think you can find a guy that's like your Jameson Williams type with the Detroit. It's a guy that's going to take the top off the defense, has certain routes that he runs, maybe doesn't run the full route tree, but you're just using his speed to open up things and stretch the defense out a little bit. And you can provide that if you have the legitimate deep threat that can do that. We don't have a legitimate deep threat outside of DK right now, but if you move DK, I'm guessing you would probably go out there and find a guy that would fit to that, and you would still be able to free GSN plenty well at that point. Let's also remember the GSN's breakout game this year came when DK Metcalf was on the bench,
right,
for that injury.
Mm-hmm. So I think that, I think some people get it in their heads that this one guy can do this thing. There are other guys out there that can do similar things.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that there's other receivers that can take the top off the defense. Is there going to be a guy that can command the kind of attention he fully can command? Maybe not to that point, but can you find a guy that can command almost as much of that attention while not spending $33 million a year on a new contract to get it done and be able to put those assets in other places? That's why this has got to be in consideration. It's about a finite amount of resources. How do you put those resources into the different piles to make this team the best to a contending state? That's the question at hand.
Yeah, I hesitate to go over 30, honestly, at this point. With the way this team is, with the state this team is in, and with what DK has shown over the last couple months, I hesitate to go over 30, and I suspect you're going to have to.
I would suspect you'd have to as well. It's a lot like the quarterback contract market. Next guy up is going to be the next guy to be paid up at the high water mark. So I don't know how you get down to 30 as well. And yeah, it's going to be hard to pay that kind of price, man. It will.
He needs to go star in more movies so he can make up the money that way.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Be calm. Thank you for the $2. Is Andrew Luck Hall of Famer? Yes or no? I say yes. Not a chance on this one. He only played 6 years, right?
6 years. One of those years was about half of the year was cut short due to injury, over half the year on one of those years. So about 5.5 years of play there. Be calm on that side of it.
And he never won MVP. He never played in a Super Bowl. He had one, I think to my recollection, he had one standout season where he was like really, really good. No, not a shot.
Yeah, I think he definitely had a lot of splash there, but this isn't be calm with me and Brendan's debate. This is inherently what's at the part, and Brendan's at least a little open to this with being that if you give him that the splashy shorter period, he'll be a little open to it. With me, I'm a little more closed down to it where I want the 10 years. I want what I grew up on as being the standard set for the Hall of Fame, where it should be close to 10 years of kind of dominance as a run, 10 years of Pro Bowls, 8 years of an All Pro. It should be more into that range than it is. You got 5 years, and I feel bad for Andrew. It's not all his fault because he got beaten to hell there. But he did retire early. He did retire very young into his career and just didn't get enough time to really get that. I think you probably need at least another 4 years there to solidify himself.
Yeah, and the peak wasn't that good. I mean, it was good, but I don't think he ever made the All-Pro team.
No, he's got 4,000 yard seasons. The top was 4,700 yards. It's a really good year, 40 touchdowns passing, but it's not that he wasn't out setting records or blowing the way. He's just a really good quarterback. Definitely had a horrible environment he was dealing with too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's it for the donations. Thank you, everybody. This might be a record.
Geez, I think so. Thank you. You guys are amazing on that, by the way. Just unbelievable support to both of our channels on that side of it.
The good news is we're not going to have to spend a ton of time talking about these Bears because I feel like there's very little you can say about them. They are a lifeless team that hasn't won a game in 10 weeks. I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they have been getting kind of waxed these last 3 games since they got rid of Eberflus. So let's start with the offense. What can we say about this offense, which I was high on going into the season, but very little has worked out the way that it should have.
Caleb probably would have benefited from having a year of sitting down on the bench and taking some time to learn the game a little bit better. Putting like a guy like Tyson Badgett out there probably in retrospect would have been smart for the Bears. They didn't take that approach. The line actually in pass protection is well rated, but they have a little bit of that thing going on where I think if him holding the ball, his lack of decisiveness in the pocket, being a rookie that's trying to figure it out, is holding back that offense at times. He's been sacked 60 times this season. So he's getting hit, harassed, harangued quite a bit. And they're not able to take advantage of all those skill position players they have on the outside. There's times where they're playing guys in different positions that's just weird. They're having Keenan Allen run 9 routes, and then they're having Rome Odunze run slot stuff. It's kind of counterintuitive. DJ Moore's a yak guy, but they're having him run more of the longer developing routes down the field. It just is an offense that's not been set up and well put together even after Waldron's left. It's got talent. They don't stay committed to running the ball quite enough, even though Dumdis is having a relatively okay. He's not doing a lot of great stuff for them, but it's definitely an offense that its weaknesses, whereas we've dealt with offenses in recent weeks in the Packers and the Vikings, they can go after the weaknesses of our defense. Here's one where we can go after the weaknesses of their offense. Not just bad, but we can get after the things of where they're bad at.
Yeah. It's an offense that I thought was going to be a lot of fun this year, and they have not been. They are the opposite of fun. I still am high on Caleb. I think he's going to be really good in this league. I'm impressed with what I see from him for the most part. But you do see that Superman switch go on sometimes where he just feels like he has to go do it all. And I can understand why he might feel like that in this offense. It's sometimes, the urge to try to jump over 3 defenders and then outrun 3 and then throw it into quadruple coverage 40 yards down the field. I can understand the urge to just decide, look, I need to do this crazy thing or else we're never going to get anywhere. But it's probably not good for his growth as a quarterback in this league. So I'm a little worried about that. But he, I think, is overcoming it well to have at least an okay season. And there's a good amount of talent. I will say Keenan Allen, I've never seen him look this slow. I've never seen him look this sluggish. I must just be near the end of his career. A lot of Bears fans say Odunze has been disappointing so far. I don't know if it's been him. I don't know if it's been the situation, but I still think that he is the next coming of Larry Fitzgerald ultimately. So there's talent here, and I'm worried about it. But this offensive line, I imagine, especially with no Tevin Jenkins, he's out. You should be able to do what you need to do there, and everything else won't matter nearly as much.
No, you should run there's be a lot of creative boxes I'd run against Caleb in this game, trying to confuse him, get him thinking. And they don't run the ball with any consistency enough to have you fear that. Where some of the teams that have been able to get after you in that way. They don't throw with the on-time quick stuff, balls out of his hand fast. Last couple of weeks, we've had them, hitting us with those flat route throws and just getting the ball out of Darnold's hands first later in the half into the third quarter, fourth quarter, where Darnold started to kind of now push the ball a little bit more down the field. So you've got the method to be able to go after this offense and take them apart. And they don't have as much of the strengths to be able to go after you in that same sort of equivalent fashion.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that's really all that can be said about this Bears offense. They're bad. They're lifeless. Nothing. I guess Cole Kmet's been okay, but even I've been disappointed in. I thought he was going to be better than this. If they could, I'm sorry.
Kind of an average guy. Just he's sort of a kind of a jag guy. Not bad, but he's just a guy down in there.
Yeah, and you should be able to get a ton of pressure on Caleb. So at the end of the day, nothing else matters. It's the other side of the ball that I'm a little worried about. I think this Bears defense is good. I think they've kind of broken down because the offense is so bad. And I think their spirits kind of broke after the Hail Mary. But this is a defense that has played okay this year. And I think they've got some good things on that side of the ball. Now, Eberflus is gone. So they've lost their coach. But I still look at this roster and I go, I kind of like some of the stuff they got cooking here.
They got some talent. Montez Sweat's obviously can be troublesome coming off the edge. Brisker, a safety, is a pretty good player. The 2 corners are actually okay. Tariq Stevenson's having a bit of a down year, but the other kid that they signed to an extension, he's legit. He's tough. He can be a long day at the office out there. Edmonds, the free agents they signed from the Buffalo Bills at the inside linebacker position, is a really, really pretty good player, real rugged, real big guy that runs around back there. I don't think that they can quite create the pass rush that we've had to deal with here in recent weeks, where this is a team on the defensive line that you can kind of stuff up, I think, a little bit. And certainly since Eberflus is gone, they've not, I think, been able to generate anywhere near the same kind of pressure. So it is a team that if we play them early in the year defensively, I might have been a little more worried on this one. I think that with this one, there's some places that you can get after them with, especially if you're going to stay committed to running the ball. I mean, that's probably as big a key coming in this game as anything is run the gap stuff, stay committed to it. Watching the Cardinals go up against this Bear team early in the year, it stood out to where they just stayed with the run throughout the game. They didn't get away from it. They didn't start, well, now we got to start throwing the ball. No, if it's working, stay with it. And then just keep staying with it. Keep staying with it. Stay committed, especially a Thursday night game like this where the players are tired. You'd love to be able to, reduce this game down and compress it and reduce down the possessions your defense has to play in this one. Run the ball, Grubb. Run the ball against this defense.
Yeah, and that is what has me concerned, because there's no guarantee he will. And I know the offense put up points last week without running the ball. But that's the problem. When you don't run the ball, there's nothing consistent. There's nothing dependable. So this could be the week where you don't run the ball, and because you don't run the ball, you only put up 10 points or 13 points. And that leaves the door open for the Bears to win. So yeah. I agree with everything that you're saying. It's hard to have confidence in this offense to run the ball, as frustrating as that is to say, and balance the offense, because we've seen it over and over and over again. They don't do it.
Yeah, it's true. And it seems to come back again. Grubb just doesn't like to do it. And that's where you can kind of trace that once you get this deep into the season. It's happened so many times over that you go, boy, he just does not want to, there's something inherently against it. No Walker in this game. So he's only got Charbonnet. And I think Charbonnet has been dealing with his own kind of oblique injury thing. And does that draw Grubb even more? Because he's got that natural inclination. And I think, Brendan, if you come out this game as a loss, I think you're going to come to find that it's one where you've, as we've seen throughout this year, Geno ends up with 40, 45 attempts, and your running backs end up with like 12, 13 on the day. You go, well, there you go. The disparity again is back in place, and that's how you came off losing this game. I think that'll be something we can point to if it's an L.
Yeah, K9 had more catches in that game than carries, I think.
Yeah, and that's where some of it is they were serving as sort of carries out of the backfield to a degree, but it's not enough that I would have leaned on that if that was going to be the case in what you did. I would have thrown the ball 13 times to Walker out of the backfield on those plays. If that's what you're going to do and make that your method of approach, then really hit it. Don't just kind of hit it.
And he actually averaged more yards on the carries than the catches, which is really hard to do. Like he averaged about 4 yards a carry, and he averaged 3.5 yards per catch. That's brutal.
Well, I will say with Walker, as the year's gone along this year, something that stood out to me is that, and it could be the injuries with him, so I'm not trying to toss him up, but he's not been the tackle breaker as the year's gone along. He's getting the ball out in space, and the first guy is bringing him to the ground when they rally up out of flat. And that's something in prior years that we hadn't always seen with him, where he could always seemingly break at least the first tackle.
Yeah, which makes his lack of vision all the more problematic.
It does. Yes, because when he's turning down a hole to run himself into the arms of that first tackler to bring himself down for a 1 yard gain that was going to be a 5 yard gain instead, if he just took it up the field, it starts to stand out more and more when you're right, breaking those tackles and being dynamic in that way.
So I think that really kind of sums it up. Again, normally we'd have more to say, but this Bears team has just been so dead inside ever since the Hail Mary against Washington that I don't feel like there's that much more to say. They're just a team that's kind of, maybe more than any other team right now, is just kind of going through the motions, I feel like.
To your point, I think that this is more than any other team that we played this year that is walking into this game, and over a course of many different games this year, they've been checked out. That Eberflus, when that happened, there was already some questions there with them on where you had that team and how they were going. But once that happened, now you got a full ejection seat situation going on. And these kind of teams, it's very much clear what you have to do with these type of teams, which is get on top of them early, put them down, put them away, and they're not coming back into the football game. But if you let them hang around, if you give them some momentum early in this game and let them come out and start to feel good about themselves on a team that seems to have been really tough, they'll tap into that spirit. Now you'll have a highly motivated team throughout the rest of that football game to go at you. So take care of business here. Take this team down. Yes, Thursday night. Yeah, it's on the road, but you're in a much better state than they are, and you're a much better team than they are. And this should be a win that you take comfortably from them.
Yeah. Even the Raiders are fighting more than this Bears team right now. Like we've seen the Raiders, they should have beaten the Chiefs. They did win a game this week. So it's something that seems unique to them and maybe the Giants. But go ahead.
What you get a lot of times with these kind of teams in the situation, Brendan, and this is where this opens up too, and then not just the checkout, but you get a lot of the guys doing the business decision stuff. The edge rusher who's looking for the next contract that offseason may not play the run in that game as solidly because he's pinning his ears back because he's trying to get a couple cheap sacks at the end of the year to inflate his value up. And do you get those individual guys starting to make those decisions across the board? And now a defense will fall apart by that way. But that's where you got to take advantage of that. And they have that going on right now, where I think there is some of those guys doing individual. I'm trying to get mine because I know that the team ain't going anywhere, and take advantage.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's just go ahead and cut to it. What do you think happens? How does this one go for the Seahawks?
I think that you're just a better team and you're going to be more motivated. And I don't think this Bears team is going to be motivated. The weather's not going to be bad. It doesn't sound like, so I think that doesn't neutralize you in a way it could if it was like snowing, let's say. I think you're the better team. I think you win this comfortably. I'll go 24-13 Seattle Seahawks.
That was my exact score for my preview this morning. So
let's go.
I got to go with it now.
Let's go.
That's got to mean something.
That's got to mean something, man. If it's 24-13, we're getting a lot of
video yet, right? You didn't let that video influence your score, right?
I didn't. I woke up late today, so I was a late riser. I didn't have a chance to check it out.
All right, so that's got to mean something. We're going to go with that 24-13, and we'll be alive if we win this game. No matter what, we'll be alive next week. That does not mean we get in. That does not mean things work out, but we get to play meaningful football next week again, and I do cherish that. I do. Even though I wish it was better.
You and I are the same way, man. If we've got a punch left to swing, we want to still see it swung. We're talking a lot about this offseason and a lot of the donos in our discussion today, but we're not overlooking this year, and the potential is still there for this team to do it. And if they get in the playoffs, anything can happen. And, as long as the odds will look going up against that Detroit team where they look still as long as if you're dealing with a Detroit team that is way more beat up than they were when they played you previously on in the year.
Yeah.
We're still in this, man. It's late in the year. Let's get this dub. Let's get alive. And you never know. The Cardinals might do the Lord's good work this Saturday for us.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. There was actually one of our best attended streams of the year.
Yeah. I want to thank you to everybody too. Bill, Be Calm, Ryan, God's Gang, Rowan G, Marcus, especially John Stillwell dropped, I think, well over $200 on donations on the chat here. And he's been one of our bigger donators in the past. You guys, I just want to echo before, I'm sure Brendan was going to say something similar on this, that, I know a lot of you guys are heads hanging a little bit right now with where this team is at right now, and maybe not feeling the best about where things are heading, but for you guys to still come in here and show up in the way you did today and still show us all this love in it. I know we're very thankful for that here and very appreciative of all you guys do to help us from that support standpoint. So you may not be able to count the Hawks week in and week out, but we can always count on you guys.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we will do this again next week, even if we are eliminated at that point, I guess.
Yeah.
We will be doing this show before the Rams game next week, and then whatever happens, happens, and we will react to whatever happens. If we have more games to play, then we have more games to play. If we don't, we don't.
Amen. Well, we'll be here throughout the offseason if that's the case, guiding you guys through it on the pathway to getting ourselves right if it does go that way. But still alive, still fighting. Fat Lady ain't sung yet.
Yep. All right. So you'll see more from us later tonight for sure, because this game starts in like 2.5 hours. And we got plenty more to say. But until then, let's remember it's game day. We don't usually do a show on game day. Rare treat for y'all that we could do this early. And look, there are only 2 games left this year, maybe. There are only 2 games left this year, and you're never guaranteed tomorrow. You're never guaranteed the next year. So let's try to get this team to be the best version of themselves over the next 2 weeks. And the only thing that we can do as fans is cheer them on. Our ability to affect all that is minimal, but we do what we can as fans. So going to say it, going to get out of here, and then we're going to get to work. So go Hawks.
Go Hawks.